be coming on board, and he will be taking over my position in lieu of my absence. So I'm going to recap. There are a few helpful acronyms. Community Services Information is the local term of our HMIS. HMIS is your Homeless Management Information System. These two acronyms are used interchangeably, and I'm going to do my best effort to just refer to it as HMIS CSIS, cover all our bases. HUD is the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. This is the federal agency in which most of the money, most of the federal dollars that come down to provide homeless services, they are allotted to HUD, and then HUD will then allot those funds down to either a state level, county level, or even directly to the service provider. COC is your continuum of care. EDA is your enter data as. UDE are universal data elements. We will be going very in depth on these two concepts once we get into the live site and just briefly over PowerPoint. And then over to the right, we have some acronyms regarding project and certain activities. We have Rapid Rehousing, RRH, HP, Homeless Prevention, PSH, Permanent Supportive Housing, and then TFA. TFA is used commonly at local agencies and regarding requests for temporary financial assistance. So when we make check requests, we're making a TFA. Okay. So this little graphic is specific to the FL 500 continuum of care. We have what a COC is. Unfortunately, there has been common language that has gone about that stated that Suncoast Partnership is the COC. Pardon me while I try and multitask and get this user in.
I'm working on that, Lauren, right now.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah.
Okay, then I'm gonna relax. No more multitasking for me. So what is a COC? Well, if you all are unfamiliar with the term, we are all the COC. There's Tabitha. There we go. Great. Glad we got you in. Thank you very much, Amy. So we are all the COC. The COC is not any one agency. A continuum of care is a regional or local planning body that coordinates housing and services funding for homeless and at risk of homelessness families and individuals. This is a graphic of the agencies within our COC in Sarasota, Manatee County, but a similar graphic can be created for those agencies in Pasco County. There is no one agency that is the COC. We are all working together to provide the services and the assistance to prevent and end homelessness for our clients. We are all part of a systematic response to end homelessness. So when we hear language of the COC, and it may be referred to Suncoast Partnership, we need to remind ourselves that Suncoast Partnership is not the COC. The federal government does mandate that an agency be designated as the lead agency of the COC, but that does not mean that they are the COC. We are all in this together. We are all working together to provide the services and create the response system that prevents and ends homelessness. So you and your agency are the continuum of care. But the question is, what does Suncoast Partnership do? Well, and in Pasco County, the Pasco County Coalition on Homelessness is the lead agency of the COC. In Sarasota, Manatee County, just so everybody knows also, I will be sending out this PowerPoint along with step-by-step guides, and hopefully, if my YouTube allows me, we will be able to post this recording on YouTube, so whenever you guys are bored and have 5 hours to spare, you can spend it listening to this training again. But just in case anybody's frivolously writing notes, kick back, relax, enjoy the show. You will get all of these materials after the training. So let me go back. Suncoast Partnership and the Pasco County Coalition on Homelessness, we are the designated lead agencies of the COC. Suncoast Partnership is the HMIS lead agency for both COCs. So that means that we administer and manage the Homeless Management Information System, which includes program and project setup, assigning user licenses, monitoring data quality, providing technical support, training on HMIS CSIS, and submitting HUD and state required reporting. We also develop a systematic response to homelessness, to end homelessness. That's something that the lead agency is, the COC lead is responsible for. Ideally, each continuum of care will have a leadership council who is responsible for the governing of the COC and setting the appropriate plans in place to prevent and end homelessness. Suncoast Partnership also applies for, manages, and monitors funds allocated by federal, state, and local departments to prevent and end homelessness. So these are the main goals and the main duties of your COC lead agency and your HMIS lead agency. So with Pasco County coming on board, we will only be responsible for your HMIS. We will be responsible for creating training documents and providing those trainings when new projects come on board, or if you just have any questions. Anytime anybody has any questions in regards to technical support, please do not hesitate to call. We are always ready, willing, and able to provide trainings and answer questions. Do not hesitate to ask. So as I keep trolling on, HMIS and CSIS, what is the difference? Nothing. In our continuum of care in FL 500, it was decided back in 2019 that the language of HMIS, the Homeless Management Information System, it seemed to create a bit of a barrier when we were trying to get new agencies to come on board and utilize the system. When agencies were introduced to what HMIS is, some of them may think, well, I don't provide homeless services. We just provide diapers, or I just provide rental assistance, or I'm only paying somebody's utility bill. I don't provide homeless services. So in order to become more inclusive, we got together as a CSIS committee, and a bunch of acronyms were thrown around, and later it was narrowed down to Community Services Information System, CSIS. Since that rebranding, we have had 6 new agencies come on board that had not been using our system before. Pasco, you guys will continue to refer to your agency or your HMIS as HMIS. That is not something that we have any intention on changing, and we also don't have the capabilities to change that. That would happen at your COC level. So in Sarasota Manatee, we're CSIS. In Pasco, we're HMIS. In this training, we're HMIS CSIS. Clear as mud, right? So what is Community Services Information System? It is a software application system designed to record and store client-level information on the characteristics and service needs of homeless persons. Specifically, CSIS is used to produce an unduplicated count of homeless persons, understand patterns of service use, and measure the effectiveness of our homeless programs. So I always like to show what your data will do, what we use your data for. Each continuum of care has system performance measures, and those system performance measures are created by HUD. They're like your goals, and all of the data that you guys enter will produce these outcomes so we can determine how effective the community is at preventing and ending homelessness. So each COC, regardless of the name of your software or who your HMIS lead, has very specific system performance measures. And these are this is the outcomes for Sarasota Manatee County. Your goals are designated by HUD, and they are across the board, across the nation. So when we're talking about our percentage of clients exiting to a positive, permanent positive outcome, we're looking at those clients that have entered a rapid rehousing project and exited positively. Your national standard is 85%. And then when we look at the success rate, we're at 77% at the end of FY20 and 72% at the end of FY21. All of this is measured by the data that is entered into your HMIS CSIS. So this is just an example of what your data can create. Your data also creates opportunities to provide funding into your community. So for instance, we have every year, well, especially right now with the ESG CV money that's coming down, the CARES Act money, a lot of that and those funding allotments are determined by the need of your community. So when you're entering data, remind yourself that you are depicting the need of your community. And if you ever wonder, well, do I need to enter this data? Well, we have a saying in our continuum of care that if it's not in HMIS, it doesn't exist. So you may have a line of people outside your front door that are in need of your services. But if all of those people are not entered into your projects, then you're not depicting the actual need of your community. So your data depicts the need and it creates funding opportunities for you all to provide those services. So keep that in mind when you're entering data and when we might get frustrated that I didn't get my degree in social work to enter data. Well, it's part of it, unfortunately, because as we all know, data equals money most of the time. HUD is not going to come down and count all the people that are standing outside your office building, I assure you. So that's why we enter data. We enter data to continue to receive the funding, to prevent the homelessness, and create a systematic response. Today, we're going to focus on who, where, when, and what. Who needs the services, shelter, and programs that are available in our community? Where do we encounter a person needing assistance so we can identify their needs? And when do we enter this information regarding this assistance the person is receiving and the vital facts about this person? We always want to enter our data either live or within 24 hours, with few exceptions. And what information is needed and how do we enter that information? So this is a picture of your service point. Some of you are familiar. Some of you are coming through this training as a refresher. Some of you are seeing this for the first time. Pardon. So as soon as you log in, this is where you will see client point and we search for our client. Over here is a basic assessment that we will all be using, regardless of what project you are working in. We will all be using a very basic assessment that contains the 16 universal data elements. So your universal data elements are indicated by the red font. Those universal data elements are in fact universal. They are across the nation. We are collecting information on these elements. So demographic information like birth, gender, race, and ethnicity. And then when we talk about our living situation and the household composition. And then further on into the assessment, we look at income, insurance, disability, and non-cash benefits. These are all universal data elements created by the federal government. So we are all providing a consistent response to each of these questions. No COC is without these universal data elements. No HMIS is without these universal data elements. So let's start by learning a few basic ideas about our CSIS system. Please let me know if you guys have any. Feel free to chat and at any time. I am watching the chat box. If you guys have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask or raise your hand. There's also this little guy where if you raise your hand, I will see that you're raising your hand and I can answer your question. Okay, just a little housekeeping. So the 4 C's, your 4 C's, this will be very new for your for Pasco County, I believe. If you've been in Sarasota, Manatee County, you're fully aware of what the 4 C's are. The 4 C's all relate to your data quality. As your HMIS lead agency, we are responsible for monitoring your data quality. And data quality is the data complete? Is the data current? Is the data consistent? And is the data correct? So I thought that make this a little bit more interactive, and feel free, you don't have to follow along, but because I say the 4 C's, complete, current, consistent, correct, so frequently throughout the course of this training, I have filled up a nice glass of water, and every time I say complete, current, consistent, and correct, I will take a sip. So essentially, we're having a fun little drinking game first thing in the morning. Hopefully by the end of the training, you will fully understand what the 4 C's are, and you will also be nice and hydrated. So feel free to play along. I thought it was kind of a little silly thing that we can do as we work virtually together. So what are the 4 C's? Well, the 4 C's, they all speak to your data quality. When we are talking about data quality, we are looking to see, is the information that you are entering complete? And that is looking at your 16 universal data elements to see if there is data entered into the system in these universal data elements. So when we're talking about data completeness, the reports that we have, they review each of these red colored fonts and whether there is data in here, if there is a response. Because when you look at this drop down in the live site, there are responses of client refused, client doesn't know, and data not collected. We really want to do our best to avoid using those responses. I like to call them our no-no responses. Those no-no responses do not provide us complete information. So when we're looking through here and we're entering a client into the system, if we are providing a whole assessment filled with client doesn't know, data not collected, or client refused, then we are not providing a complete picture of the client's story. And that's really what we're doing here. Every time we do an intake, we are telling the client's story. So data completeness and your report card for your agency will look at every one of these universal data elements and determine whether there is a complete response in the system. When we talk about current, we are speaking to data timeliness. Data timeliness is really important, as you all know, that if a client comes into one agency and we don't enter that data live, that client may have the opportunity to go to another agency within the COC and receive a duplicate service. So that's why we want to make sure that we are entering timely data. We want to make sure that we are either collecting data live with the client and providing a complete picture with their assessment, or we are at least doing it within 24 hours. It avoids duplication of services and the already very limited capacity at all of our agencies. So if we are entering data on time, meaning within 24 hours, we are going to be able to show the rest of our COC that this client is working in this project with this agency. So if the client were to go across the street to another project and agency, that agency would be able to say, hey, I see that you were at JFCS and received a similar service. Can I call your case manager for you if you need an additional assistance? something along those lines. We're not trying to play gotcha for any reason or anything like that, but we do want to do our best to avoid in the duplication of services in our already very, very limited capacity of funding. So entering data timely, we have a report card that looks at the data that was entered and evaluates what date it was meant for. So we have a backdate function that if a client had come in on Friday and I did not enter them until today, that would not be timely, right? So we want to make sure that we're entering that data live as best as possible. You do have 24 hours to enter clients into projects, enter clients into shelter, and provide financial assistance. And then if we're just providing case management, you have up to 72 hours. But it's also that we are able to capture that information as it happens. Data timeliness is also very important as we continue to identify high need clients. Just recently, we had a client that we have been looking for quite a bit of time. And then poof, all of a sudden, there was a service that was entered into the system, and we thought that we were going to be able to find that client at that agency. But unfortunately, the service was entered 4 days later than when the client was actually in that agency. So we missed an opportunity. It's just really important to enter live data because it just helps the COC, like I said before, avoid a duplication of record and keep that live system working. When we're talking about data consistency, so we have data completeness, data timeliness, and data consistency. Data consistency is a very, very, very important concept within your HMIS system. If we are not entering data that is consistent, meaning does it make sense, then we're not telling a very good picture of the client's story. So we always want to remind ourselves again that you are telling the client's story in each of your assessments. So when we look at this client's information, we want to make sure that we're telling the story that makes sense because this client is telling you their story and you are entering data to report that story to the system and the continuum of care, to other agencies within the COC, to show this client is homeless as of this date, they've been homeless for this long, or they're at risk of homelessness, and this is where they stayed last night. The idea is to tell a story that makes sense. Data consistency is very, very important to every HMIS system because we don't want to tell a story that doesn't make any sense, right? And in some of our systems, especially the coordinated entry system, a client coming into the system, if their story is not told in a manner that makes sense, it could literally mean housed and not housed. So we really are affecting lives with the data that we enter. I have seen it, unfortunately, many times where clients have come into a coordinated entry intake and their information, it's not complete, it's not current, and it's not consistent, and it's not correct. Take a little drink. We want to make sure that we are entering consistent data so that that client's story is being told. So when we talk about data consistency, we are looking at areas that just don't make any sense, right? So looking at this living situation, as we go down the list, our relationship to head of household and household type. This story is telling us that the person doing this intake is the head of household and they are a family without children. They live in Sarasota County and their client location is FL 500. So they're a Sarasota Manatee client. Their housing status indicates at risk of homelessness. But our prior living situation which is, where did you stay last night? Please keep that in mind. If you're taking any notes at all, please keep in mind that your prior living situation is the question, where did you stay last night? There's no confusion when we ask that question. HUD, on the other hand, thinks that prior living situation is a clear indicator that means, where did you stay last night? We all know that if we've been working in the system, prior living situation, if we ask someone, what's your prior living situation? You're going to think, where did I stay before I was homeless, right? That's not what the question is asking. The question is asking, where did you stay last night? And based on that response, we are able to tell whether the client is literally homeless, at risk of homelessness, or at imminent risk of homelessness. That response will really guide us in determining eligibility for certain projects and a client's total length of time homelessness started. So from here on out, when we see prior living situation, we are seeing in our brains, where did you stay last night? And every time we enter a client into a project, we are asking all of these questions. We can never assume that the data that is populated into your assessment is correct. I want everybody to vow to ask every question on these assessments. We can never, ever assume that the questions that are auto-populated in these assessments are complete, current, consistent, or correct. We have to just assume that none of this data was entered by you, so none of it is complete, none of it's current, and none of it's correct. So go ahead and ask every one of these questions with the client. I assure you it will help you in telling the most complete, current, consistent story for the client. So when we're looking at our prior living situation, we're asking the client, where did you stay last night? The client is indicating that they stayed in an emergency shelter. Well, right here, we can see that the client's housing status states at risk. Well, if the client was staying in an emergency shelter last night, unfortunately, they are no longer at risk of homelessness. They are literally homeless. And Pasco County, allow me to provide a quick disclaimer. You guys do not use the housing status assessment, the housing status universal data assessment. That is something your COC eliminated. So just keep that in mind. That is one area that you do not have to collect. Your COC, that's long before us decided to stop using that housing status question. Just putting that out there also. But in Sarasota Manatee, we are still responsible for ensuring that the housing status is consistent with the prior living situation. So this would be a perfect example of an inconsistent response. If the client had stayed in an emergency shelter last night, they are category 1, literally homeless. As we go on and we see that the client's length of stay, so where did you stay last night and how long have you been staying there? The client will respond that they've been staying there for a week or more, but less than a month. And their approximate date homelessness started. So our approximate date homelessness started is, when did this instance of homelessness begin? So the client may have a long history of homelessness in your community. But if we notice any breaks in homelessness, or if information in our CSIS HMIS system appears to be outdated, we always ask these questions. Act like most of the time we've never seen any of these clients before, and this is our first time engaging with them when they're entering our program. I always like to tell people to imagine each of these assessments as a virtual piece of paper. And if I had filled out a virtual piece of paper and I said, hey, Carla, go ahead, I filled out this intake for this client. Sign your name to it and turn it in for me. Good? Awesome. Well, Carla's not going to be like, okay. No, she's going to review all of the information that's on that assessment, and she's going to say, actually, I'm going to interview the client because my name is attached to this intake form. I am verifying that all of this information is complete, current, consistent, and correct. So I need to interview the client for myself. That is the same thing as what we are seeing here on all of these assessments. Each of these assessments, your name is attached to. Your name is saying that the data entered on this assessment is complete, current, consistent, and correct. And if you're comfortable with turning that in without reviewing any of the information, by all means. But do keep in mind that your name is attached to these assessments. And if you want your name to have good data quality scores, then go through and ask every single question with the client, because a lot of this information changes from one day to the next, like prior living situation or approximate date homelessness started. So using this example, the client's prior living situation of emergency shelter, they've been staying at the emergency shelter for less than a month. Their approximate date homelessness started is in fact November 25th, 2019. That's when their homelessness began, and it has not been broken up by any length of stay longer than 90 days or more, or any temporary residency for 7 days or more. This is their approximate date homelessness started. When we look at the next question, regardless of where they stayed last night, how many times has the client been homeless in the last 3 years? So we're asking the client, in the last 3 years, how many times have you been homeless? This helps us tell the client's previous homeless history. So maybe they have a couple instances back in 2018 where they've been homeless for quite a bit of time. Or maybe this is their very first time. However the client responds is how you will enter your data. And then we look here at the total number of months homeless on the street in emergency shelter in the past 3 years. Well, this indicates 2 months in the last 3 years. Well, that doesn't really make sense considering the client's approximate date homelessness started is 2019. So this is one of those areas that maybe at the time this was initially collected, that was current information, but now a full calendar year has gone on since this assessment. So that response would be 12 months or more. The idea is to make sure that we are going through all of these questions with the client so we are providing the most complete, the most current, most consistent, and the most correct information so we can really depict the client's need. A client that has been homeless for only 2 months in the last 3 years, it's likely that they may not need as intensive services as someone that's been literally homeless on the street for 12 months or more. So it's just a way for us to be able to triage clients as well. And to look at eligibility. A client that has chronically homeless status, this is how we're able to tell that story of being chronically homeless. So with this information, we're going to go more in depth on other areas that may be inconsistent. But I wanted to give you a brief overview of what data consistency means and how it really can affect a client's story, and the implications of having your name attached to data that doesn't make any sense. What does that look like for your agency? Some agencies run weekly data consistency report cards. Some agencies run monthly data consistency report cards. And looking at all that data to be able to determine where we're struggling or maybe where we might not totally understand why this data matters or what's going on, you might have to go through a refresher training, and I would hate for anybody to have to go through that. It's just me and talking about data consistency for 2 hours, but I mean, I don't know about you guys, but one training's enough for me. So if you guys ever have any questions about data consistency, why it matters, anything like that, please let me know. Feel free to contact me and we can walk through it. Because at first, you know, some of this stuff, it's kind of boom, right over your head. But as we work in it and we can really see why it all matters, it really starts to make an impact. And the more you do it, the more, of course, you'll get accustomed to understanding it. Does anybody have any questions on data consistency, whether it be data completeness, data timeliness, data consistency? If we're all good, we can move forward. I'll wait for the chat to blow up, I'm sure. Okay, great.
I have a real quick one.
Yeah, go for it.
With my organization, I sometimes get like come in over the weekend or like on Friday, and I'm not there on Friday. So with the 24-hour done in the real time, is that going to stop?
So your 24 hours, I believe, are in that business day time frame that we do not account weekends.
Okay.
I don't think that, unfortunately, the system, we can't keep the system, the reports updated to see, to like remove holidays, because obviously those dates change over the time. But so do weekends. That's actually an Amy question. I believe that they do discount those weekends. But Amy would definitely be able to provide better insight on what exactly is calculated, but I'm almost certain that weekends are not included in that report card.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, of course, thank you for your question. And timeliness, so thank you for your question, Tabitha. And timeliness can never be changed because we can't go back in time, right? As much as all of us probably wish we could, especially over the last year, and avoid all of this chaos that's happening. Timeliness can't be changed. Data completeness, when we send out data completeness report cards, you can get a detailed report and see which client is missing information, which case manager created the client that's missing that information, and same thing with data consistency. You can go and correct those errors either as you go along or after the fact. That's why a lot of agencies with data completeness, they will run regular data completeness report cards for themselves and then ensure that your users are going in and correcting that information by the month's end to ensure that you get a good grade. Anything less than 90% in your report card will show as below average. I can pull up just so we have an idea of what they look like. I will pull up one of Suncoast Partnerships reports so you guys can see what they look like. If I can find something. Reports. 2021. All right, let's look for Suncoast Partnership. Okay, so here's Suncoast Partnership. This is what each of your agencies receives, and I'll just share ours. So here's your entry exit timeliness. Let me zoom in just so everybody knows. And Pasco, you guys are just being graded on data completeness right now. You are not being graded on data timeliness or consistency yet, but it's definitely something that will be happening because we want to improve the data quality of all HMIS systems in the continuums that we manage. So what it looks at for data and data timeliness is of the program entries, how many are meeting that timely standard. and we had 22 events, and 20 met the 24-hour timeliness standard. So we got that grade of an A. It is quite literally a report card. And then your agency can see where that information. So there were one client was entered 3 to 7 days late. One was 1 to 3 days late.
Mm-mm.
Mm-hmm. And then.
Sorry.
It's okay. I like it. Please, anybody that wants to unmute and doesn't have feedback, I'm happy to go back and forth. This is your data completeness score. So this report card looks at the total clients entered into a project, all of the fields. So those are all those universal data elements, those 16 red fields. And then the amount of fields that have a null response, meaning that it's data not collected, client refused, or client doesn't know. And then that will generate your percentage and give you a grade. So there are some agencies that are real sticklers for 100%, which is great. I think it's awesome, but be mindful that this information, as you're going along, if you're looking at any of this information, if it's not complete and it's not consistent and it's not current, then we'll probably create a little bit more work for ourselves, because we're going to have to go back and update that information so that it is complete, current, consistent, and correct. And then I'll go into our consistency. It grades it by project too. So we have all these different projects at Suncoast Partnership. And then we're having some struggles on data consistency with some staff. So we bring those staff members in, we walk through why it doesn't make sense and what we're struggling with, and try and identify how we can improve our scores. This is everything. This is what most agencies, when they receive a score of below 90%, they will also do the same. And like I said, there are some agencies that are actively running these reports. So you might get a data quality or data consistency report card by your supervisor that says, hey, go in and make these changes because your data that you entered doesn't make any sense. So just be mindful of that. Okay. And without any other questions, we'll just move forward. Hopefully. Okay. So the CSIS HMIS system tracks information about the clients and households. It looks at the services rendered, the outcomes, and it can even assist in managing a case plan. We will be using program project entry and exit. We can also provide services, manage case plans, action steps, follow-up appointments, and more. So over to the right, you have your difference between programs, providers, and projects. Your program is the funding source. Your provider is your agency. And the project is the activity that you are the service that you are providing, essentially. So for instance, we have over at the Salvation Army, we have your Everyone's Home project provided by the Salvation Army, Sarasota, and it's a rapid rehousing project. In Pasco County, I'm not familiar with which projects you're working with. I know one is a community heart project, and you guys are providing those services. So the services under that, which can be rental assistance, utility assistance, case management, it all depends. So those are the difference. Your program is the funding source, your provider is the agency, and your project is the activity. Okay. So our system is a client-centered system. Sorry, my coworker is barking at a neighbor cat that just entered my yard. I hope you guys can't hear him. Sorry. Our CSIS system places the client at the center of the process, allowing those who provide services and important resources in taking care of everyday needs and long-term support so that the client can become safely housed. So when we look at this family, we see all these globes. These globes represent the various agencies within our COC. that provide the services to prevent and or end the homelessness of this family. So this might be the rapid rehousing provider. This might be the career source where we've referred the mom and dad to get assistance in finding a job. The Early Learning Coalition is going to help the family get the clients into a daycare center so that mom and dad can go to work, whatever the case may be. But the idea is that the clients are always at the center of our system. We are not working in silos. We need to work collaboratively because what services one agency has may not be the same services another agency has. So as we work collaboratively, we are able to provide those wrap services to prevent and end homelessness. Okay. Slice of time database. This is a little tricky to understand in a PowerPoint visual, but what you enter for today's date and is true for today and moving forward until it is changed. Okay, so slice of time database. When we enter a client into our project, we are taking that information down as it is true for today. So this a lot of times is why when we see information auto-populated into our assessment, even if we've never worked with the client before, there will be data that was collected at a point in time, right? Well, that data will carry forward, and you guys will see that when you enter the client on today's date. But this date and this data, it's old data. It stays in the system and remains true until you change it. So that's another big reason why we want to always, always, always ask all of these questions with our clients, because we don't know when this information was last entered. We don't know when this client was last working with another provider in our COC. So we can never ensure that this data is complete, current, consistent, and correct. That point in time data, it keeps that data true until you change it on the date in which you change it. So using this example, our client comes into the project on December 6th. And when the client came into our project on December 6th, their income was $300. Well, after a bit of case management, the client was able to, work and ask for additional hours. And then following month, in January 9th, the client has informed us that they have increased their income by working a couple more hours a month to $368 a month. Well, so we will want to make sure that we create an interim to reflect this increase in income. So we don't go back and delete this income. We would end this income for the day before we create new income. So this record set of the client making $300 will still exist in the system, but you add a new record set to show that on this date, the client has informed me that they are making this much money. And this can be said with anything. A client may enter your project literally homeless, but then after becoming housed, they are at risk of homelessness. And then by the time they exit the project, hopefully they're stably housed. This is all related. Did you have a question, Tabitha? Okay.
I'm just trying to write it out.
This is all related back to that slice of time data entry. We never want to just, it would be if we had a piece of paper like back in the day and at first intake, the client was making $300. Well, a month later, if the client increased their income, you would create a new form that shows that client's income. You wouldn't go back to the original form and scratch out or put white out over that income portion. You would add something to show that on this date, they increased their income. Slice of time database, it's very confusing just speaking about it, but the more you work in the system, you'll get more familiar with the concept. So CSIS, privacy and security. Privacy and security are everyone's responsibility. Everyone is expected to provide the highest level of privacy possible to keep our clients' information that we collect and use confidential. Everyone needs to adhere to the CSIS required policies and implement best practices at every level. That's computer, user, client, and organization. Computer security. Every computer's power settings must automatically turn off the display after a reasonable length of time. You may also use, if everybody has a Windows keyboard, there's a little Windows button. It's the 4 little squares right here. Whoa, whoa, this guy. If you hold this button down and the L button, your computer will hopefully lock and the display will be turned off. Hopefully you've set up a password protected display and you have to type in your password to get back into your desktop. This is just another way to protect your system and the information that you're working on. Service Point also has an automatic logout function. It's around 10 to 15 minutes where if you are not using Service Point, it will kick you out. So keep that in mind as you're working with your clients. Sometimes conversations can go awry and we're trying to pull it back in, but the client's just going on and on and on. We want to do our best to either pull the conversation back in or scroll to the bottom and hit save on our assessment so we don't lose any of the information that we were working on. This function decreases potential viewing and or manipulation of client data by unauthorized individuals. Each computer or network is required to have current up-to-date antivirus software and be located in a secure location with an individual or network hardware or software firewall. Client security. Each client must be made aware that their information is to be entered into CSIS HMIS. At this time, there's no requirement that client consent be obtained to enter client information into HMIS CSIS. But if we want to share that information, consent must be obtained. The difference between entering and sharing is that if we have clients that are coming in for basic needs like food, shelter, or other essential services, then the client can be entered without client consent. But sharing information will allow us to connect those clients with other service providers in our continuum of care. If a release of information is not scanned, scanned, and uploaded to the system, we cannot share that client's information. We are not, without that supporting documentation, we cannot say that this client has agreed to share their information with other COC providers. Client's information is protected under HIPAA and PHI, anything related under that. We want to make sure that we are ensuring that our clients are aware that when they enter this data, when we enter this data, their data may be shared with other COC providers and other funders and programs. So most agencies have systems set up in place that clients must sign a universal ROI, at least in FL 500 continuum of care. Those clients sign a universal ROI in order to gain access to services within those agencies. Pasco County you guys are still under this agency-specific agency-specific ROI, and I will direct you all to your continuum of care lead agency, the Pasco Coalition, to discuss any information regarding that. So again, each client should sign a universal release of information for the sharing of their information among participating providers. Individual releases are required for each client 18 years or older. ROIs are required to be scanned and attached to the client's record. Whenever there are communications regarding a client, the client household number should be used, not the client name. Please, when you are corresponding via email, please only use client IDs. There are some agencies, of course, that, at least in our continuum of care, that may not have access to that client information. But do your best to only use initials or client IDs. If you're communicating with another service provider who does not have HMIS capabilities, please encrypt a document, password protect it. We are dealing with very sensitive information here. We are working with clients that are in a very vulnerable state, and we need to protect their information as best as possible, which is, again, why we make it mandatory to have those universal ROIs added, scanned, and uploaded to our CSIS system, because we want to verify that the client has agreed to share their information. If there's no supporting documentation, we cannot add clients to community by name lists. We cannot have discussions about those clients without that universal ROI uploaded to the system. Agencies are required to comply with federal, state, and local confidentiality laws. Agencies must have the privacy notice posted at intake or comparable location with general reason for information collection and reference to privacy policy. This notice can be found at on our website under the documents and training section. Organization security. We must create an environment of confidentiality by restricting open discussions that include secure information. A lot of our agencies work where clients are. So, for instance, the Salvation Army Sarasota, you guys provide daily shelter, daily food, we have clients in the building all the time. We never want to have open conversations about secure information. We never want to be referring to clients using full names or any identifying information. Homelessness is it can be a very traumatic experience for our clients, and we need to ensure that we are establishing and maintaining that trust with your clients. I assure you that clients do talk, and they will, if they hear that someone is speaking openly about another client. It would be the same if you heard your friend talking openly about another friend. You're going to lose a little bit of trust in that relationship, I think, because most of the information that's given to us is given to us under the guise of confidentiality and trust. And just with any system, the less a person trusts the system, the less likely they are to engage with that system. So we want to start and end all of our interactions with our clients under that very, very confidential guise that your information that you are telling me is protected. And I am not going to share it with the world. I am only going to share it with those agencies that could potentially help you. So please keep that in mind when we're talking about creating an environment of confidentiality. This is also why you guys, we have you all sign user agreements, because we want to ensure that you guys are agreeing to this standard and to this practice. We only have staff who work directly with clients or have administrative responsibilities, able to look at, enter, or edit client records. Additionally, we must notify CSIS system administrator immediately upon a user's termination of employment. No user should have access to the system if they are no longer working within the COC. It is very important that we terminate that user's license just to avoid any potential mishaps. User security. System only allows one login per password at a time. You cannot log into the system on 2 different terminals. User login and password must be kept secured and not shared with anyone. Please do not share your username and password, no matter who asks for it. If you come into an interaction where someone is asking for your username or information, please direct that person to Suncoast partnership staff so we could get them their own user information It is very important that you do not share your information. Any users that are found to be sharing information and login credentials will lose access to the HMIS CSIS system. So please do not share your login information. This is not your Netflix. This isn't your Amazon Prime. This is very secure information that our HMIS CSIS is working off of. And we want to ensure that everybody that needs the ability to enter data has that ability. So please, if anybody asks you for your user login information, do not share it. Direct them to either their supervisor or Suncoast Partnership staff so we can get them set up with their own login information. It is in complete violation to share your user ID and password information. So please do not share. Password guidelines. Password must be 18 to 16 characters in length, one number, one capital, one special character. They do automatically expire every 45 days. When your password expires, you must enter a new one. You cannot enter the same one. However, there is a silver lining. You only ever need 2 passwords. You will get a temporary password today, and you will create your password that you'll remember for 45 days. Then you will add in 45 days, this one will expire. You'll do a new one. In 45 days, this one will expire. You can go back to the one that you created today. So you only ever need 2 passwords in CSIS. It is smart to fluctuate some of the special characters or numbers in there just to keep your information secure. But I don't know about you guys, it is so frustrating when you have to reset a password. And then when you go to create a new password, it tells you you can't create a password that you already used before. So it's very frustrating to me. That is a silver lining. You only ever need 2 passwords in HMIS CSIS. Also be aware that CSIS policy states any license that is not used for 60 days or more is recycled. Warnings concerning license and activity are emailed out to user and supervisor on a monthly basis. This just practical password guidelines. It's a substitution is a great way to add complexity. I use this. You can substitute an I with the exclamation point, an S with the money sign or a 5, the A with the @ sign, an O with a 0. Now your hippie soul can become the password H exclamation point PPIE money sign 0UL. Easy to remember, difficult to crack. From here, we're going to go through a little quick reference guide. You will see all of these symbols in your HMIS CSIS. We'll start with the green plus sign. This means that you are adding a specific item. It could be a person, description, or even event. Let me see if I can zoom in. When you use the red minus sign, this means that you are removing something. So plus sign means you're adding something. Minus sign means you're removing something. The red font, those are your universal data elements. Those are the required data elements by the federal government. Your gold data elements, those are strongly recommended, but also required. Black is any other text that is in a black font. It is a COC required field. If your assessment has questions on your intake, please ask and answer every question. Do not skip any questions on your assessments. If your supervisor is saying, oh, don't worry about that question, please let Suncoast Partnership know what that question is so we can remove it from your assessment. Every question on your HMI or on your intake is required by the COC. If there are any questions that are not necessary, please let us know and we will promptly remove them. Your pencil, this allows you to edit information. Your garbage can, this will delete information. We want to use our garbage can very, very carefully because once you delete something, it is gone forever. You cannot get it back. So please be very mindful of using the garbage can. There is no recycle bin in HMIS. Once something is deleted, it is gone and we have to recreate everything. Well, You have to recreate everything. We can give you the information to recreate it, but it will be you that has to recreate it. The red triangle and the green check mark. So when we're in our HUD disability or our HUD verification fields, like disability, income, non-cash, and health insurance, these fields have HUD verification subassessments. They start out as red triangles, and then as we enter the data and collect information and provide complete responses, those red triangles will turn into green check marks. So we will walk through that in the live site and it will make a lot more sense, I assure you. Okay, the magnifying glass lets you look into an area of the client household record. For example, click on the magnifying glass next to non-cash benefits and see all the benefits that are being received. The paperclip, this is how you attach documents to the client profile. Or for instance, your universal ROI tab, you will be adding your scanned documents using your paperclip. The blue eye provides special informational reminders to make sure you are entering the most reliable data and avoiding duplication of records. The save button is one of your most important buttons. If you do not hit save before you exit or save and exit, you will lose the data that you just entered. So please always keep in mind to save your information. Just like when we were talking about the automatic logout function for CSIS, if you feel like the conversation's going super south and we're not going to be able to bring it back, scroll down to the bottom of your assessment, hit save, and try and wrangle that conversation back in. Top right has the printer function. If you're working on a specific area or a work area or report, hit the printer button from that area. The orange exclamation point is for your system news. If we add any upcoming trainings, they will be added there. You'll be alerted there. Your little star is your favorites. These are clients that maybe you're not case managing, but you're seeing regularly, and or maybe you have appointments to see them. You click that favorites button and it's like a bookmarked page. And then your blue question mark is service point help. Feel free to contact myself or Amy for any service point help inquiries. We are here to assist you in all of your questions. Please do not hesitate to call. We are your service point help. That's what we're here for. So from here, we're going to take a break, give your brain a little break, stretch your legs and your arms, refresh your coffee, whatever you need to do. We are going to circle back at 10:50. I'm going to give a nice substantial break in time for you guys to kind of stretch your legs out and shake your head. Maybe whatever you need to do. So we're going to start back at 10:50 and we're going to have some more users join us from Pasco County, and then we're going to get into live site, create some clients, and do some other fun stuff. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the chat box or unmute. Other than that, enjoy your break.
Miss Laura, do we leave this up
Yes, do
Is
not,
there a page up?
just leave, you can step away. Don't close anything out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Oh. And Tabitha, if you can, oh, thank you, Carla.
I'm here.
I'm gonna post a form. I just need, did you sign in yet? No, okay. I'm gonna have you sign in for attendance purposes. You'll see it in the chat box. There we go. So if you can just click this form and sign in from there.
Let me see if I can find it.
So when you look for the,
Okay.
okay, thank you so much.
You should have it now.
Great, thank you. I got it. Perfect.
All right, and you said that all the material that you're going over will be in links that you'll send?
Yes, ma'am. You'll get that and your user information.
Okay, thank you.
You got it. Hi, Brian. I saw your question. One of the questions on the form, number of times a client has been on the street. That question is in the last 3 years. And it is indicated on that question. You'll see that when you go to enter that data. The question is asking the number of times the client has been in emergency shelter on the street in the last 3 years. So we're only looking at, obviously, in the last 3 years, not their entire lifetime.
All right, thank you.
You got it. Thank you for your question.
I did have another question about the ROI. If they're, I know we're not trying to get the gotcha attitude in case the client is trying to double dip, but if they refuse, if they understand the loophole and are trying to get the same services through different organizations, and they refuse to sign the consent, what do we do then?
So typically, a client will, okay, let me think of the best way to say this. The services that would be duplicated, that would be like a financial assistance service, it's a non-negotiable, especially at Salvation Army Sarasota where you work. These are non-negotiable services. It's not an option. If you want this service, you will sign this ROI. And so a lot of times that avoids that. So, and if the client refuses, but it's specific to the project and we'll be working on Friday, it's very specific to your project that you'll be working in. We will be going over that, but most likely by the time clients get to your project, that rapid rehousing project, they will have already signed an ROI. They would not have been able to get referred to your project without that ROI.
Okay, so we would be able to see if they have already signed one or not?
Absolutely. And we'll go over how to, I call it CYA, cover your agency, as opposed to the other way, cover your agency, and we'll go over how to cover your agency to make sure that that supporting documentation is scanned and uploaded in CSIS so that you can enroll that client. We're doing our best to make sure that the universal ROIs are already added to the system prior to them being referred to projects like yours, because we can't share the client's information without them agreeing for us to share their information, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay.
So typically they'll be, I would say 9 times out of 10, they'll already be uploaded to the system, but we're going to walk you through how to cover your agency. And then sometimes those ROIs, they're only good for 2 years. So if the client hasn't signed one and it's expired, then you'll also need to be mindful of that, of when the ROI was created and when it expires. So you're, again, CYA, cover your agency.
Okay. All right.
But great questions. No, great questions. Thank you. Okay. Let's see where. Okay, so we finished up our PowerPoint. Get into our training site. See, everybody's on board. Welcome back. Hope you guys were able to refresh your coffee and get a snack or something. So as you guys can see, I'm going to mute everybody again. Feel free to mute, unmute, use your chat box to ask questions, whatever we need to do. Mute all.
Hey, Danielle with Human Services. How are you? I'm living the dream here.
Danielle, for some reason we can hear you, even muted. I'm not sure why.
Can you mute yours?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's very weird because I have everybody that is muted. Everybody's muted on my side. I don't know why I can still hear. Can you test again, please? Okay, I can't hear you now. So, all right, good. Okay. So this is Service Point. This is our training site. Everybody will have access to the training site. Pasco, you will have different, it will look very similar, but it obviously will say Pasco in the browser, but you won't even notice that. So I highly recommend, as we work to learn the system and get familiar with the system, use your training site. Go in here and enter data and add clients and do whatever you need to do to work with clients that in your system, and get familiar in the training site. Your training site will not carry over any data into the live site, so it can avoid any confusion. You can really do whatever you want in the training site. Make as many mistakes. If you want to create clients and households and enter them in the program, and then have me monitor what your entry and see if there were any areas that needed to be corrected, I'm happy to do that. I love when people say, hey, I added this client in the training site and I entered them in my program. Can you review it so I can see if there's anything that I'm missing? It's just a great way to do a little checks and balance and kind of quiz yourself on creating a client until you become accustomed into working in the system, right? So this is your training site. It obviously says Service Point Training Site. Your username, which if you don't already have it, you will get as soon as this training is over, is your first initial and your last name. And then you will receive a temporary password today, and you will reset that password as soon as you log in for the first time. So this is your Service Point. This is CSIS. Suncoast Partnership. This is my agency. You guys will see your default project, so the project that you work in all the time. So everybody has different projects that they regularly work in. Ideally, the project that you work in most will be your default project. But there are times where you're going to have to show the system that you're working in a different project. We will go over that in just Thank you, Renee, so much. I don't know why my computer does that, just randomly. Thank you so much for telling me right away. I really appreciate that. All right, so the system news is where you guys will see any upcoming webinars that we have hosted virtually for now. Hopefully soon we'll start getting back in the office. Over here we see that orange system reminder. This tells you that there's new system news. This is if we had any clients, we would hit the, oh, that's not what I want. That Service Point help. If you guys have any questions, feel free to use that or call me or Amy. And then your star is if we were on a client profile, we would hit this star and that would like bookmark the clients essentially. Over to the left, most of you will only see Client Point and Resource Point. Some of you may have Shelter Point. It just depends on the projects that you're working in. Today, we're going to focus mainly on working in Client Point. Most of you will be working in this module. This is where we search for clients and we add them to the system. and then we can enter them into our projects. So from here, I am actually going to shadow one of our users. You guys will most likely not have the ability to shadow unless you're a system admin or an agency admin. I'm going to go ahead and shadow Brian. So here we have Brian Overby. Thank you, Brian. You're like, yeah, it's me. So Brian's default project is City Hot Shelter because previously he was working regularly in this project. He would check clients into beds, and this would show the system that clients are in this program. But Brian has the ability to enter data as a variety of other projects. And that's what we're going to be working on today. Today, we're going to create clients and we're going to enter them into a project. Everybody on this call will be doing this. For some of our Pasco County users, this will be a different way than maybe you historically have been entering data. But keep in mind, this is all because of the funding source that you guys are working with and our ability to report information to appropriate funding sources and appropriate programs. So please keep in mind that, you know, there are a lot of changes happening at Pasco County, but all of it might seem overwhelming and different at first, but before you know it, you won't even notice the difference, I assure you. So when we first log into the system, I don't know about you guys, but for me, if I'm sitting at my desk and I think, oh, I need to go grab that piece of paper off the counter, and then I walk into the kitchen and I'm like, what am I doing in here? I don't know if that happens to anybody else, but that happens to me all the time. So every time you guys log into the system, ask yourself, what am I doing in here? You guys have so many different clients that you're working with and so many different projects. Oftentimes, when we first log in, we're so ready to just start entering data. We may not be entering data as the right project. So always ask yourself, what am I doing in here? And then when we answer that question, we'll know what project we need to enter data as. Your enter data as is one of the very first steps. It is the first step in entering data correctly into CSIS. You want to make sure that you are collecting data and you're entering it into the right program. Because if we don't enter data as the right program, we are going to be entering our clients into our default project. So no matter what, anytime Brian logs in, he is automatically entering data as this City Hot Shelter. But he's no longer working in that project, or the clients that he's going to create today, they're not getting enrolled in that project. So he needs to enter data as the project in which he's going to be enrolling his clients. So remember that when you first log in, ask yourself, what am I doing in here? What project am I working in? It will save you a whole heap of time in going back and correcting potential mistakes. So first step, what am I doing in here? Well, I'm going to be working in, let's think of a good project. Let's do, that's not good. You still have.
Most of them are in overnight shelter.
I know, I just realized that. Let me do Jessica then. I'm going to be Jessica Elwood. Okay, so Jessica has the ability to enter data as all these different projects. She's a program director, so she has a lot of program managers. She has a lot of different projects that she needs to be able to work in and to be able to monitor, right? And be able to review the information that's entered. So today she's going to enter data as and everyone's home project. And then you guys, everybody else on the call, most of your projects will all be working off of Client Point, regardless of whether it's homeless prevention, whether it's rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing. The system is the operations and the workflow will always be very similar to what we're doing today. When we go to create a client and enter a client and then provide services, all of the functions will be the same, I assure you. So just because you're thinking, well, I don't have access to that project, just put on your make-believe hats and act like you're entering data as the project you're going to be working in tomorrow or the next day. So Jessica asks, what am I doing in here? I'm creating a client and I'm going to enter them into this project. Well, what day am I doing this for? This is where we are talking about our timeliness. So we can backdate information. Backdating is when we were talking about our timeliness score. And today we would be entering live data if we weren't in a backdate mode. But I'm going to make this entry and create these clients back on February 1st, we'll say, so we can show the progress of these clients in this scenario. So I'm going to backdate to February 1st, 2021, and give an approximate time. This is how, if you guys were to create, it was the end of the day yesterday, and you didn't have enough time to enter the clients into your project yesterday evening. Well, this morning, you can log in and change your backdate mode to yesterday at 5 p.m. You're still in that 24-hour window where you would still get good timeliness scores because it's still within that 24 hours. Or there's a variety of reasons why we would backdate. Ideally, we wouldn't backdate any information, but life is what it is, and sometimes time escapes us, and we have to go back and we have to add things for that date. That goes back to that point in time and creating information that is true for that date. You want to show the system that this is the date in which this happened, regardless of when you're entering that data. Okay. Okay. So what am I doing? I'm entering clients into everyone's home. And what date am I doing that for? February 1st. So we're going to go to Client Point. And this is where we're going to search for our clients. We always want to client search. So here, we always do just to kind of round about, let me see, I think I provided some services to Kim Kardashian last week, and let's see if she's still in here. So her family is still in here. This is where we always client search so that we can continue to build off of Kim's profile. If this was our client that we were working with, we could verify by her last 4 digits of her social security number and or birth date, preferably both. This will avoid us creating new clients and duplicating records. You always want a client search. If this were our client that we are going to work on, we are going to create a new client, but I want to show you what an existing client profile looks like. So we're going to click on Kim. This is asking if we still want to stay in this date. So we're going to stay in this date. Okay. And then this is Kim's historical client profile record. We are able to see some basic demographics, whether she has an ROI, any projects that she's been entered into, and any services that she's received. We can get more in-depth client profile information by clicking on here. and reviewing this information throughout. Kim doesn't have any hard facts in here just yet, but as you guys work in our system and work in the system, you'll see that client's historical information is all kept in this client profile. From here, we can see her household and if she was a member of a household before. She was not. And we can see if she was in any projects, any case managers that she's worked with. All of her historical information will be in CSI, in HMIS CSIS. I'm going to actually, because this isn't providing you any good information, log into the live site to show you our other test client. So I'm in our live site. As you can see, it looks the same. The only difference is the colors and the fact that it doesn't say training, really. Same thing, I'm going to client point, and I'm going to search for our good old boy, Brandon Test. He's our test client. He's been through the ringer in our COC. We're going to search. And we're going to find the Brandon Test that we're looking for. As you can see, there's multiple Brandon tests in the system. If you guys ever find that there are multiple clients with the same first and last name and social security numbers and or birth dates, what you want to do is send myself or Amy those client IDs so we can merge those two profiles into one. So let's hypothetically say that these two clients, 338532 and 120889, let's say that they had the same social and the same birthday, and you know they're the same person. What you're going to do is send a quick message. Literally, all you have to say is merge 120889 338532. It will just avoid the duplication. We will take all of the information from one client profile and merge it with the other client profile. So Brandon only has one profile. So keep that in mind as you work in the system. It will help us deduplicate all of the client records that are existing in our system right now. I don't need any more information on that on a merge other than the client IDs. So let's look at Brandon Test. We can see here, this is what a client that has a history in our system looks like. So we have Brandon, we show his birthday, his social security number, his gender identity, his race, whether he's a veteran or not. And then we can see all the different projects that he's working in. We can see anything that has an open entry or an open project start date. This shows the system that he is currently working in this project. So this is where if you wanted to avoid the duplication of records and why, or not duplication of records, but services, why we want to make sure that we're entering data live. Because if we had Brandon who was attempting to enter into another rapid rehousing program, we could see here that, oh, well, it appears that you're actually working with St. Vincent de Paul rapid rehousing. Do you want me to contact your case manager? And we could click here and we would be able to identify who their case manager is. This is, again, not trying to be a gotcha, but with the limited resources that are available in our community, we shouldn't be duplicating efforts ever. I mean, we only have very limited resources, and if we're providing the same resources to one person in various agencies, it's a big old waste of time, right? So let's make sure that we're entering data live so that we can see this. Other things that we can see, scroll down, and this is all on the summary page. We can see all the services that the client has received. We can see how long they've been in our system and how far back their services go. Like our boy Brandon, he's been in our system since 2012. So he is a long-term homeless client that we need to get housed and keep housed. From here, this is where we can go client profile, look at other information on the client, different contact information, emergency contacts, housing offers, if they've been spoken to by our diversion specialists, any client notes from the COC, and different file attachments. This is one place that you can look for that ROI is under your file attachments, but ideally they would be uploaded under your ROI tab. Anytime you see a paper clip with a number attached to it, that means that there's documents in that attachment. Look here, and CYA, cover your agency. So we see that Brandon signed this. He's agreeing to share all of his information, and we're within that time frame. Okay. Entry exit. Same thing. Brandon's in a lot of projects. He's double dipping everywhere. I don't know what's going on with Brandon. Case plans. This is if you're case managing. This is where you would add your case plan. So system admins can see everything, but your agency will only be able to see the projects that you have the ability to enter data as. So you guys would not be able to see another provider's case plan. Those case plans, consider anything entered in this case plan as a locked filing cabinet. The only people that have keys to that filing cabinet are the same people that you're working with in your agency in that project. No other agencies can see the notes in your case plan unless they have access to that project. So consider this where all your safekeeping notes go and a comprehensive a comprehensive space for you to keep your case management notes. And notes can look like a variety of things, but we'll go over that in just a moment. Back to looking at our service transactions. We can see all the different services Brandon received and whether there was funding attached to it. So we can see that Brandon back on January 7th received rapid rehousing from JFCS in the amount of $950. It looks like he was obviously rapidly rehoused. They paid for his rental deposit, his rent payment, and his utility deposit. This is again another place for you to look to see if the client has recently received services from a fellow COC provider. Okay. So from here, this is just a basic overview of what a client's record that already exists in the system can look like. And if we just went ahead and created Brandon as a new client, we would lose all of this historical information. So that's why we want to make sure that we are always searching for our clients before adding new clients. You always want a client search because that client may already have an existing record and you want to keep building on top of that record to show that history. Okay, and then if I wanted to save Brandon as one of my favorites, click that little star, and he's actually already saved in my favorites. To see my favorites, I go over here and look at my favorites tab, and then I identify the client. It's just a nice little way to bookmark yourself. So we're going to get out of the live site and we're going to create a new household. All right. So I am Jessica Elwood. I am going to create a new client in our system. We're not going to use Kim Kardashian. We'll use Let's use Michael Scott. Michael Scott has his full name reported. As you can see here from the dropdown, we have our no responses of client doesn't know, client refused, and data not collected. We want to do our best to avoid using those responses. We always want to make sure that we are collecting complete, current, consistent, and correct information. All right, so full name, social security number. If the client refuses to enter their social security number, please remind the client that this may limit their ability to receive services from your agency. Every agency is different. Specific to this program is a federally funded service and does require the client to enter their full social security number. But other projects like shelter or street outreach or basic needs, we don't necessarily need that social security number. So clients may refuse to enter that. And if they do, you would just enter all zeros. But we really want to do our best to collect the client's social security number because this also can assist in duplicating records. Does the client enter it? So no, you guys, the client, you guys are all entering this data. So Brian asks, does the client enter it in the system themselves? As we discussed in the CSIS HMIS privacy and security, only those that have administrative responsibilities or work with clients have the ability to enter data in the system. So you guys are responsible for entering the data in the system. The client, if they refused and then they tell you that they want to add their social security number or you have to collect it, you would then edit that information. I can actually, let's do that as a learning tool. I'll enter all zeros for Michael right now, and then I'll show you how to edit that information if the client provides it at a later date. So no, clients are never entering data into the system. So we'll say approximate or partial, U.S. military veteran. Michael Scott is not a U.S. military veteran. His date of birth, quality, his gender identity of female, male, trans female, that's a male to female client, a trans male, female to male, or gender non-conforming. And then we have our no responses of client doesn't know, client refused, and data not collected. Michael Scott identifies as a male. His primary race is white. He does not have a secondary race. You do not have to select a secondary race. You can just leave this as select. Ethnicity, he is non-Hispanic. From here, we can search again, make sure there's no Michael Scotts, and then add new client with this information. From here, the system is saying, hey, are you sure? Are you sure you want to add a new client? Have you searched for everybody? And we have, so we're going to move forward. We're going to add, the system. This is 2/01/2021. We're doing it for this date. We're going to go to our household tab and start a new household. From here, we're going to identify our household type. And we're going to say that Michael is a male single parent. So we're going to create Michael Scott and his fictitious son. Because Michael Scott's a real person too, right? No, sorry. All right. We always need to identify the household type. We actually can't go past this screen without identifying the household type. From here, let's say Dwight. And then we're going to fill out the rest of this information. First, let's search for Dwight Scott. Just first and last name. If there were any matches, maybe Dwight was in a previous household with his mom who received services. But again, you always want to make sure that you're searching because you don't have to create a whole new client if Dwight already existed in the system. Okay, full name, and interest of time, I'm just going to breeze through this. For children and the U.S. military veteran, you are allowed to use data not collected as that response for any minors. So minors are allowed to have data not collected as the response for U.S. military veteran. That is because minors obviously cannot agree to serve in the armed services. Okay. There we go. Full date of birth. He is a male. He is white and non-Hispanic. We're going to add new client with this information, and it's saying, are you sure? We're going to say, okay. Okay. And let's just do Dwight and Michael. So this is their household. We have Michael and we have Dwight. We're going to continue. Okay. And then from here, we need to make sure that we are reporting our household properly. So our household, the questions are being head of household. Who is the head of household? Well, obviously, in this scenario, Michael Scott is the head of household. And watch when I identify Michael Scott as being the head of household. What happens to the relationship to head of household? We're going to say yes. And this instantly changes to self, that Michael Scott is himself the head of household. From here, we're going to make sure that we identify Dwight's relationship to the head of household. Dwight is his son, so we're going to find that from our dropdown and respond accordingly. From here, so this to answer your question, Brian, if we identified that we have Michael's social security number, at first maybe we entered all zeros, but now we have it, we can click that pencil and edit this information to record Michael's social security number. Whoop. And now we can save. From here, this is where we are going to ask and answer every question. For new clients, your intakes will always be blank. So all of this information has never been asked before. But for our older clients and clients that have history in here, that point in time comes into play, where the last time that information was collected, it will carry forward and you'll see data in here. If we were to enter Brandon into the project, all of his old data would carry forward and it would appear that the questions have already been asked. But from this training, we know that we cannot use the data that's already existing in there because we don't know if it's complete, current, consistent, or correct. We need to make sure that we are asking each of these questions because we've never seen these clients before. We've never met them before. And we've never asked these questions before. So we cannot assume that the answers that are already populated in here make any sense at all or are telling the client's story as it is true for today. So please, when you guys enter clients, regardless of whether there's data already populated, I cannot stress this enough, ask and answer every question. It will save you a whole heap of trouble in the long run, and you will be telling the most current story for the client's record. So because we created a new client, we have all blank answers. Michael Scott's never been asked these questions before, so we're going to make sure that we ask and answer. Relationship to head of household, we're going to identify that he is himself the head of household. Our client location, he's in Sarasota, Manatee. He would be, you don't have multiple options. It has FL 500 or it will be that FL 519. Your household type, we have family with children, family with only children. So that would be your unaccompanied homeless youth household. So that would be like a minor, a 17-year-old with a child. Family without children. So this would be a couple, or a couple with an adult child, and then an individual. So here we have a single father. He would be a family with children. Prior living situation. Can everybody type into the chat what prior living situation is? What that question is? What is the question we're asking the client when we say prior living situation? We're not even saying prior living situation. We're saying this question. Great, great. Keep them coming, guys. Love it. Awesome. So great. I got about half of you. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Keep them coming. Shannon. All right. A pluses. So we have 22 people on the call and I have about 10 responses. So half isn't bad, right? Thank you. All right. Keep it coming. Woo! I wish we could think of more interactive ways to do these trainings. Great. Thank you, Danielle. Thanks, Sarah, Carla, Brian's.
I tried to text, but it's not sending it. Like I can type it in, but it won't send.
Well, that's a thank you. So Tabitha, what's the response? Or what's the question?
It's where they stayed the night before they came into your program.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So Priscilla, your question might be a little different. Priscilla, the question on this HUD assessment or on your assessments of prior living situation should always be, where did you stay last night? Great. Looks good. Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for the participation. Love it. All right. So where did you stay last night? Well, this is going to indicate what the client is eligible for. Because this is a rapid rehousing project, we want to make sure that the client is in a, not make sure, but for the client to be eligible for this project, they would have been staying in a place not meant for habitation or an emergency shelter or a hotel paid for by an emergency shelter voucher. That would make them literally homeless and eligible for the project. I do want to walk through a couple other scenarios that can touch on quite a few different instances that get a little confusing with clients. So a lot of clients and a lot of projects that we're talking about today are going to be more for homeless prevention. We of course have rapid rehousing providers on the call, but we also have homeless prevention providers as well. So when we're talking about homeless prevention, we're really narrowed down to rental by clients, owned by clients. If clients are coming for rental assistance to prevent evictions or even utility assistance to also prevent evictions, we're talking about clients that have a verified lease and an active lease with either landlord, a rental company, or a mortgage company. So when we're talking homeless prevention, we're really narrowed down to a lot of these areas of owned by client with ongoing housing subsidy. Maybe they have some projects even with housing subsidies like Section 8 or vouchers, there are some projects that still allow you to be eligible for those arrears, especially right now because of COVID-19 and how much the pandemic impacted everybody's ability to pay their rent. They have loosened a lot of the requirements on these funding sources. But we want to make sure it goes back to data consistency, that where the client stayed last night is consistent to what type of project they're entering. So if they're entering a homeless prevention project, they wouldn't be staying in a place not meant for habitation. Unfortunately, if the client stayed in a place not meant for habitation, it's likely the ship has sailed for the client to be prevented from homelessness. We can enter them into a rapid rehousing project or potentially a rapid resolution project if we're working with veterans, or even a diversion project. But really, we're not entering clients that are literally homeless into homeless prevention projects. That just doesn't make sense, right? Same as we're not entering clients into rapid rehousing projects if they're staying in a rental by client. That just doesn't make sense, right? So we also have those trickier areas where maybe we have clients that were in jail the night before. Where did you stay last night? Well, I was in jail. And I want to make sure that we're paying very close attention to these questions on the left-hand side, because these questions, these are conditional logic questions. What you answer here can affect what the next question is. So right here we see length of stay, and then did you stay less than 90 days? There's no response just yet for this, but let me respond here. We're going to say 1 week or more, but less than a month. From there, that question instantly answered. Well, we can't forget to ask the very next question, and I tell you this happens all the time, but we want to make sure that we're asking the next question. On the night before you went to jail, were you on the streets or an emergency shelter? SH is safe haven. Sarasota Manatee does not have any safe havens. I don't know that Pasco does. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe they do. I know for a fact Sarasota Manatee does not have safe havens. So we're asking the client on the night before they went to jail, were they on the streets or in an emergency shelter? We either say yes or no. And if we say no, there are no more questions that appear. If we say yes, this is where we're going to get our conditional logic. And this is where we're going to ask more questions. Like approximate date homelessness started, where they stayed, regardless of where they stayed last night, the number of times they've been homeless in the last 3 years. So to answer our question earlier, Brian had asked if we were talking about a lifetime. No, we are only looking at the client's story for the last 3 years and collecting those instances. Total number of months homeless on the street in the last 3 years. Same thing. We want to add up all those various instances and count the total number of months homeless. Let's think of another here. Maybe the clients are couch surfing right now. So they're staying in a friend's room, apartment, or house. Same thing. If they've been staying in a friend's room, apartment, or house for a week or more, they are not considered literally homeless. But if we changed this to 2 to 6 nights, we see the questions appear again. So this, again, it changes from one, I'm sure all of you know, working in homeless services, the clients jump around. Maybe where they're staying right now is in a safety plan or something along those lines, but regardless, we just want to make sure that we're telling the story so we can collect the data and tell the story of the client. I'm not sure what's going on in Janine. I don't mean to call you out, but you guys got some good news or something over there. I see y'all having a blast. I don't know if anybody else saw it, but I'm very intrigued. I can follow up after. I want to know what the good news is because somebody's very happy over there.
Thank you so much, and I'm sorry.
I love it.
We got an award letter. That's all I want to say. I'm sorry.
That's awesome. More money to the community. Rock on. All right. Good job. I saw you guys high-fiving over there. I had to ask. Okay. Circle back. So this client, we are stating, we're going to keep it easy, keep it simple. They've been in an emergency shelter. Maybe they're staying at a family shelter in town. They've been there for 90 days or more, but less than a year. Now let's say 1 month or more. We're going to ask the client, when did this instance of homelessness begin? So to make it consistent with the creation of these clients, let's say 1 week or more, because we're creating them on February 1st. So we're going to ask the client, when did this instance of homelessness begin? Well, we'll say that the clients, unfortunately, were evicted right after in that time frame of when the CDC moratorium was lifted, and they had been on back rent, and the landlord just evicted them as soon as it was lifted, and they were in that window where, unfortunately, a lot of clients were evicted, and we were unable to prevent their homelessness. So we're going to say that he was evicted on January 5th, 2021. So we ask, regardless of where you stayed last night, how many times have you been homeless in the last 3 years? This is going to account for those previous instances in which the client has been homeless. We're going to state that Brandon and Dwight had experienced homelessness back in 2019, in which they were living in their car for 3 months. So we have this time and then the other time in 2019. So that's 2 times. And then we need to collect the total number of months in the last 3 years. They've indicated that they were homeless for 3 months in 2019. And then we have our January homelessness. And then February, we're on February 1st, hypothetically. So that's 5 total months homeless in the last 3 years. Keep in mind, when we're talking about total number of months, we're not talking about calendar days. We are talking any day in a month is considered a month of homelessness. So even in our make-believe world, we're entering data as February 1st. This still counts as a month. And then that month in January, or those days in January, plus those other 3 months. So we have 5 total months of homelessness. This is consistent storytelling. We are telling the story that Brandon and his son were staying in an emergency shelter last night. They've been there for a week or more, but less than a month, and their approximate date homelessness started was January 5th. Maybe they've been living in a hotel paid for by one of our service providers. Who knows? But this is all to tell the story. We can see very clearly that this family is literally homeless, and they have a previous experience of homelessness in their history in the last 3 years. From here, again, Pasco, you guys do not use this housing status, but this family would be considered category 1. And then we're going to want to ask the family what their last stable zip code is. I'm going to say that the family was living in Bradenton and their last stable zip code 34207, and zip code quality is full. So this is the full zip code. Pasco, I don't believe you guys use zip code. We use the zip code in order to target prevention efforts to specific neighborhoods and gauge whether there are higher eviction rates or a higher need in certain communities. It also helps other providers who have funds that are limited to specific jurisdictions to narrow down that client search. So from here, since we are entering the client into a rapid rehousing program, this housing move-in date appears on entry. However, we will not be adding this. As the directions state, for rapid rehousing programs, this field should be blank upon entry, then updated once the client is housed. This is how we see how many days from the time the client entered the program to the time the client was housed. This is how we get that number. So, and most of you that are working in the HP projects or other client projects, you will not see this at all. Okay, from here. So does anybody have any questions about, just give a quick 5-second opportunity to raise your hand, type a chat. Any questions about data consistency in the prior living situation before I move on? Okay. All right, so our HUD verification information. Does the client have a medical or have a disabling condition? Well, we don't want to just ask that question because one person's idea of a disabling condition can be very different from what HUD considers a disabling condition. We always, always, always want to ask this question by clicking on this assessment. We're going to click on our HUD verification and allow this pop-up to guide us with our questions. As you can see, HUD has very specific disability types. We're going to auto-populate our responses to no. So that will move all of these incomplete responses into the no column. From here, we can ask, do you have a history of alcohol abuse, both alcohol and drug abuse? Any chronic health conditions, developmental disorders, drug abuse, so you wouldn't have alcohol and drug, it would be just drug. Have you been diagnosed with HIV or AIDS? Do you have a mental health disorder or any physical health conditions? So Brandon is identifying that he has a chronic health condition. Chronic health condition being identified as something that happens internally, and your physical health condition would be something external, outside of the body. So your legs or your arms, or maybe you are blind or deaf, one way or the other. Chronic would be something like diabetes or multiple sclerosis, something along those lines. That for Pasco, is this? I'm not teaching program specific. I'm teaching very general, and I cannot answer whether Pasco Heart program has this question. This is part of the universal data elements, so I would assume yes, but I cannot say yes or no without actually looking into your project. Okay, so Brandon, no problem. Chronic health condition, Brandon identifies as a chronic health condition. From here, this is going to populate the if yes, is this expected to be long continued, indefinite duration, and substantially impairs the ability to live independently. This is where we're going to say yes or no. It's how the client self-attests. We can say no. Client, if you would like, you can add a note on the disability. It is not required. It is only visible in this portion of the assessment. And you save. From here, we've asked all of the disability types, so we can save and exit. And then now our red triangles become a green check mark, and we can get a response to this question. So now we know the client does in fact have a disabling condition. If we just ask the client, do you have a disabling condition? Brandon may not know mental health problems? Are they self-proclaiming, or will we need to see documentation? So Brian, thank you for your question. Mental health, drug abuse, any of these disabling conditions, they do not need to provide documentation unless it is required for the project. Then you would be working with the client to get those documentations and those disorders documented by their mental health provider or by their primary care physician. So unless the client's mental health diagnosis is a requirement for the project, you do not need any formal verification or documentation. It is all based on self-attestation and how the client identifies. But for instance, if you were working with a client to get them a disability voucher, you would enter the client into the program and know that you need to get that documentation eventually. But at program entry, where we're actually not even at, we're still just creating a household. At program entry, you do not have to have the documentation necessary. No, it's something that you work on with the client. Thank you. Okay, so like I was saying, if we just ask the client, do you have a disabling condition? They may say no, because some clients think disability as, do I receive disability income? Or some clients think maybe my disability, I don't have a disability, I just suffer from depression, not knowing that mental health disorders are a type of disability. So you always want to ask the questions from here. And even if this already has a green check mark, you do not know who created this, who asked these questions. You did not ask these questions. You should always be verifying this response when you enter clients into your program. Always, always, always. You cannot ever use the data that's currently existing in here as the client's story right now, because maybe when the client first came into the system and this person was asked this question, they did not have a diagnosed mental health problem. But after 3 years on the streets, they've developed some PTSD and manic depression, and they're currently being treated with it. So you always want to HUD verify these responses and then answer this question. And that goes for any of these sub-assessments. These pop-ups are called sub-assessments. So, covered by health insurance. I don't want it to say, are you covered by health insurance? No? Okay. No. We need to HUD verify. Then go down the list and ask the question. Do you have Medicaid, Medicare, state children's health insurance program? We're going to go through the rest of these to ask the client whether they are covered by health insurance. This family is not. We're going to save and exit. Maybe Brandon had health insurance, but he lost it when he lost his job. Okay. So we've had verified first, and then that answered that no. Scroll to the next, income, same thing. We're not going to say, do you have income? No, we're going to HUD verify first. Auto populate to no, and then go down the list. Do you receive alimony or spousal support? Any child support? Brandon actually receives child support. He receives child support from his ex in the amount of $360. We're going to save this information. Continue down the list. Brandon is not currently working, but he does have unemployment insurance. He is making $1,000 a month in unemployment insurance. So again, if we had just asked Brandon, do you have any income? My mouse is slow, sorry. If we had just asked Brandon, do we have any income without going into the details? He may have said, no, I'm not working right now. But that's not what the question is asking, right? So we're going to say our percentage of AMI, and I will provide your AMI worksheet for you, but I can show you where it is on our website. Suncoast Partnership, training. You guys will get all of these documents, and a link to this. This is the presentation. I'm going to add this to the chat, actually. But you will also get this AMI. And this is for Northport, Sarasota, Bradenton. We still have to create one for Pasco, but it should be about around the same. So the client is making $1,360 a month times 12. They're at $16,320 annually with a household of 2. That puts them below 30%. Okay, less than 30, $1,360. That's that $1,000 plus the 360. And now, yes. Same thing though. If there was already income in here, you didn't ask the question. So don't use the information that's in here. If it has $0 and no, but you didn't ask the question, you would HUD verify first and then go down the list with the client. Ask every single source of income. Okay. 1,360. Non-cash. We're not just going to say yes or no. HUD verify, auto-populate, and then ask, do you receive food stamps, any WIC, any TANF childcare, TANF transportation, or other TANF funded services? Our clients are on food stamps, so we're going to save and exit. From here, we've of course answered our question. All right. So additional information, as you can see, these questions are specific to the program that they are entering in. If there are questions on here, please ask and answer. I cannot stress how important the DV information is for every continuum of care. I have a quick, go for it, Tabitha.
Whenever you're looking up their background and all that added in there, is there any way, because for Pasco County, we have to do a sexual offender database search.
Mm-hmm.
Will that information, do other agencies out there look at that, or would that type of information be privy for us to see?
So we have a question. It should be somewhere in here. Maybe it's not. It's not in our additional information. That is a question that actually is normally included is, are you a sexual offender? And that would say yes or no, depending on obviously the outcome and whether people looked it up. That is absolutely a question that you can add to your assessment for other users to have that information in there. And it can assist the eligibility of certain clients in certain projects, because like the housing authority nationwide cannot provide vouchers to sexual offenders, right?
Right.
So that is a question that we can add to your assessment for you to be able to answer and share with the community. Well, not the community, but the COC
Right.
providers.
I just know with like Pasco County, with one of the requirements that we have with the VA and with the Pasco Sheriff's Department is that we have to ask that question because they have to be tracked, they have to be monitored, so that's something that we have to do. So I didn't know if that type of information is something that we include or not.
That is up to your program and internally how you create your project, and absolutely something we can do upon request. It's a very basic question, just like these questions here that we're about to answer. These are specific to the Salvation Army Sarasota and them asking those questions. So other COC providers won't necessarily ask whether they have a checking account or whether they're enrolled in higher education or what their transportation is. They won't necessarily ask those questions, but this program wants to know so they can report to whomever is asking them to ask those questions.
Okay, thank you.
Of course, good question. Thank you, Tabitha. And with that, all of these assessments, we do like to keep very consistent questions on these assessments, on these intake forms. Anytime you see a question that's on this intake but not on this intake, it's because at one time one of your program supervisors had asked for this question to be added. So for instance, does the family have a checking account, savings account, enrolled in higher education? All these different areas, these are very specific to the project that they're entering into. So it again is required, but it's required internally by your agency. And if your agency is ever like, oh, don't worry about those questions, please let us know so we can remove them and keep that consistent message of if there's a question on your intake form, please ask and answer. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Of course, absolutely. All right, so we're going to go through here. I do want to give Danielle, you feel free to either ask a question or type in the chat box. I saw you started asking a question and I'm not sure what happened.
Hi, Lauren. Yeah, I was just going to ask, I think you clarified it. Per program, these questions are all per program. It's not all necessarily, we don't have to answer all these questions for every program. Is that correct?
That it for the additional information, yes. All of these HUD verifications, most of these questions are required by federal funding sources like SSVF, ESG, county funding that comes down. These are all universal data elements. But again, it more or less depends on the funding source.
Okay, so my question would be specific to the HEART program. Would all this be required for that?
I'm not sure. We can go over that in that program specific training or after this call.
Okay, yeah, let's do that.
And that's something you can email Amy while we're on this training she can give you an immediate response because she's been setting up your program.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Amy's available. She's online.
Amy is not in this training, but she is available if you want to email her. She is available. She's doing other stuff. I don't know what she's doing.
Thanks.
All right, so we're going to go through. I do want to go over the domestic violence, though, because it is very important to every continuum of care. Domestic violence providers are not able to enter data into HMIS CSIS. When we are collecting information to depict the need of our domestic violence victims or domestic victims or survivors, Sarah, I'll get to your question in just a second. We are using that information right here. So when we ask, and when you guys are working with clients, male, female, transgendered, gender nonconforming, please ask and answer your domestic violence questions. Our continuum of care submitted a domestic violence bonus project that would have brought $2 million into our continuum of care to provide services to those clients fleeing or surviving domestic violence. We were not awarded those funds because our community was not able to depict the need of our clients. So please ask and answer your DV victim violence, domestic violence victim or survivor questions so we can accurately depict that need of our community. That's my little spiel. Please be very mindful of it and be very, have trauma-informed care as we are asking these questions to our clients. The better depiction of the need that we have in our community, the more opportunities we have to provide the funding to meet that need. Sarah, your question, if people are already housed, HUD information probably is not required, right? Absolutely not. All of this information, if it is in your assessment, should be entered and updated regularly. All of this information is to tell the client's story as it is true for today. So regardless of whether the client is housed, if we were entering, this is a rapid rehousing project, but our homeless prevention providers also have to enter this same information. Our even LIHEAP is a community service activity that we have where it's electric payments that we are able to provide clients in need with electric service payments. Same thing. They're already housed. We're paying their light bill, but we still need to provide all of this information because it all relates back to identifying certain demographics of the community. Our disabling conditions identify who is suffering from mental health disorders or any kind of varying disabilities listed here. Whether clients have health insurance or their income, this all identifies the clients that are either in our community in that less than 30% or 30 to 50 or over 50 AMI. This all translates to greater reporting that continues to provide more funding into our community. All of this information depicts the need of the client and it tells the client's story. So regardless of whether they are housed or not, we should be asking and answering all of these questions so we can truly tell the client's story and who they are and what they're experiencing. In the past, so this would be specific. So Natasha's asking if someone identified as a domestic violence victim, we were told to not enter their names in the system, but to create some kind of pseudonym. Is this the case, or do we go ahead and enter their name and info as normal? This would be, of course, depending on your internal discussions and how your agency internally is deciding how to carry forward with clients that are currently fleeing domestic violence. But for our COC, if a client identifies as being a victim of domestic violence, and we can simply ask, do you wish to have your information locked down? That is our normal go-to in order to decide whether or not to lock the client down. If they're not coming in for DV specific services. So, and if anybody is found to be using HMIS CSIS to identify clients in nefarious reasons, like to client search users who are fleeing, then we would definitely we would immediately end and terminate their license activity, because that is a breach of our user agreement and our privacy data privacy and security standards. So the short answer is that is an internal question that you would ask within your own agency, how to handle something like that. As a COC Sarasota Manatee, if a client identifies as fleeing domestic violence, we simply ask if they would like their information locked down. If someone comes in, no, I'm not sure. Jean, I'm not sure which project you're referring to, but if they're coming into a GED program, you are just entering them into the program until they exit that program. You can add services every time. So it looks like, to me, it would seem that you would enter the client into your program and then provide those services as they received them. So services are different from program enrollment. Okay, great. All right. We're still creating a household. So let's save program specific questions till after the training. I'm happy to answer all of them, but in the interest of time, I do want to move forward And so we can all get out of here at a reasonable time. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat box or compile them in an email and send them back to me, and I'll be happy to answer them. But in the interest of time, and because we all are on this call, there's 22 of us, I want to make sure that I'm being very respectful of the people that are all on this call. We can always set up program-specific training outside of this training. This training is a basic general overview of the system as a whole. So with that in mind, I'm going to answer these questions. These are all specific to Salvation Army Sarasota. I hate to skip them, so family and friends. I don't even know what this is. Brian, feel free to have your supervisors review these and see if these questions are still necessary on your assessment, because I don't know that they are, especially with coordinated entry. Client, resident, and last permanent address. This is one of the biggest areas that we have so much trouble keeping updated information on. If your client has a contact information, they may not have an address because they're staying at the Harvest House Family Emergency Shelter in the community, but this is where we're going to get the client's email address. This is where we're going to collect this information on the client. We need to be able to have something that we can contact the client after we've enrolled them in the project. You always want to make sure that you have the client's most recent contact information. If they are housed, you would add their actual address. But for clients that are literally homeless, you could have where they're staying, or maybe they're in a encampment. And it's a roundabout area where we can find the clients if we need to go do outreach on them and get them engaged in the project. This is a big area where we really need to focus our attention and make sure that we are updating this information. So only those contact informations that are true for today are being entered. So if the client is not currently in that location, it is not necessary for you to enter that address. Really, I want to get rid of last permanent address because that doesn't really help anybody. Like if you're homeless, what does it matter where you were living before? So save here. We're going to add an emergency contact. If anything were to happen to Michael, who are we going to call? So we're going to, oh, I can't remember Pam and Jim's last name. Oh, well. And that's in Delaware, and this is their number. So if something were to ever happen to Brandon and his family, we can contact this emergency contact and let them know. Or if we lost contact with our family. I've used emergency contacts to locate clients. A lot of times if clients don't have cell phones themselves, they don't have minutes on their phones, or they keep losing their cell phones, whatever the case may be, this might be somebody that can deliver that message to those clients. It's just another way for us to remain in contact with clients who otherwise may not be able to remain in contact with their own cell phones. From here, we're going to save. So we're going to save Michael Scott's information, but we did not complete Dwight's. We only completed Michael's. So we need to go into Dwight's information. Before we do that, Michael and Dwight have the same prior living situation. So we can add household data. Select Dwight. And now any of the information that's populated here on Michael Scott's profile will go into Dwight's. We're going to save and exit. And now when we go into Dwight's profile, we'll see that this information has carried over. But we do want to make sure that we are answering our relationship to head of household. because that is specific to Dwight. Dwight is the son. And we're going to go through. All of this information is complete, current, consistent, and correct. In the interest of time, I'm going to breeze through our disabilities. But oftentimes, while I'm going to explain why we need to make sure that we're going through each client profile, because oftentimes when we're new users or we're entering a household, we forget that we have to go into the client's, all the household members' records and answer these questions, complete, current, consistent, and correct. So what happens is we'll get data completeness report cards, and the head of household's information has been answered, but the spouse or the children's has not. So you always want to make sure that you're going in to each client profile and answering all these questions so they are true for today. If we had just entered this client into our program, then all of these responses would have been blank and they would have created nulls on our report card, which is no bueno. So for this client and this additional information, this is specific to the head of household. I'm going to leave these blank for the child and save and exit. Okay, so we created a household. Took a little bit longer than expected, but that's okay. We got a lot of good questions answered. From here, we see that we created this household, and we're going to use this, all of our tabs up here as our workflow. We're going to add an ROI in FL 500, Sarasota Manatee. We only need to add a release of information and indicate it as the universal release of information. This is the only release of information that is needed in our continuum of care. You do not need to add release of information for all of your providers, just your universal release of information. For Pasco County, you guys are still working in agency-specific releases of information, and you would add for your specific agency the internal release of information that has been agreed upon by the client and by your agency. So you would add that here. So for FL 500, Sarasota Manatee, this is the only universal, this is all we need. We don't need to add every single project that we have. It is unnecessary, it is cumbersome, and it's a waste of time, really. So from here, we're gonna exit. We're going to identify that the release is granted. It is good for 2 years. We have the signed statement from our client, and you are the witness. I am Jessica Elwood. I am saving this. From here, we see our paperclip. This is where we have to scan and upload our client's release of information. If there is no scanned universal release of information, we cannot CYA. We cannot cover your agency. We have to scan and upload every client's universal release of information in order to share this information. I didn't lose you guys, did I? No. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to click the paperclip. Add new file attachment. Michael and Dwight. I'm going to have for ROI. I've scanned it to my desktop. We find it right here. And we're going to upload. Now we have scanned and uploaded our release of information. The client and Salvation Army Sarasota is showing that you have CYA'd, you've covered your agency. From here, the client's good for 2 years. The client may get referred to another agency or work with another provider within the continuum of care. They do not have to sign another one if they have this one. However, in Pasco County, of course, you guys have your own internal ROIs, so clients may have various records of ROIs. That's what our COC went away from that, so that the client only has to agree to release their information once. And then using that agreement, we can share it with the entire COC. Okay. Entry exit. We created our household. Now we're going to enter them into our program. So we need to add entry. We're going to select the entire household. Please keep in mind, this is the first step when we're entering our clients into our project. We need to make sure that our provider is the project in which the client is working in. If this provider is not correct, we cannot just select a different provider. If it says everyone's home and we're like, oh no, I'm supposed to enter this client into county ESG. We cannot just select a different project, because what we're doing is we are creating inconsistencies, because we're entering data as this project, everyone's home, but then we change the provider. The system is not going to talk to each other. What's going to happen if we do this is you are going to have to go back in, delete this information that you're about to create, and start all over again. So save yourself the trouble and be very mindful and be very patient with yourself as we begin entering clients into these projects, especially for us that aren't used to entering clients into projects at all. Be very, very patient with yourself. If your provider is not the correct provider and not the project that you want to enter the client into, simply cancel, look at your EDA, and make sure you're in the right project. I'm just going to go through with it. So, oh no, I was in the wrong project. I actually meant county ESG, and then enter data as that project and go forward from there. Because then the data that you're entering as county ESG and the project that you're entering, they will talk to each other and it will be consistent. If you're entering data as a different provider than the project, they are not going to talk to each other. That is one of the biggest areas that we have when we're entering data. Being very mindful. As soon as we log in, we're asking, what am I doing in here? I have no idea. Oh yeah, this. Okay. So my client point, Michael Scott. All right, so I'm in the right project. I'm entering both Michael and Dwight. Everyone's home on this date. I'm going to select the type and save and continue. We're going to scroll. Oh no, where's my assessment? What's going on? If you guys ever see that no basic entry assessment has been specified for this provider, if you ever see that there is no assessment in here and there are no questions, it is not a hall pass. You have to make sure that you are in the right type. Most of your projects will either be basic or HUD, and it really depends on your funding source. So everyone's home is a federally funded project, so it is a HUD funding source, a HUD type. You simply update your type. And now we have all the questions. So keep in mind, if you ever enter a client and it says that there's no assessment provided, you're in the wrong type. All you have to do, go up here, change your type, and make sure you're in the correct type. Another common thing that happens. But again, if we aren't being mindful and being patient with ourselves to make sure that we are collecting all the information, we're just going to have to go back and fix it anyways. And I don't know about you guys, but I hate doing things twice, right? So it makes more sense to just take our time in the forefront and be patient and work with ourselves. Clients are here, and I mean, if they're tapping their foot, then that's fine, but we need to do this correct the first time so we don't have to go through it all again. So our everyone's home client intake, because we just collected this information when we created the client, we know that all of this information is complete. It's all current, it's all consistent, and it's all correct because we just entered this information. We know that all of this is correct because we just did it. If we were working with clients and entering them into the system for the first time and the household was already created, we would, again, just because there's data here, we don't want to make sure, or we don't want to assume that the data is correct. We want to ask and answer every question. So because we just did this with Brandon when we created our household, we can simply scroll to the bottom and save and exit. So now we've entered our clients into our Everyone's Home project. From here, we're going to add a case manager. This is going to show the system both your entry and your case manager. When you assign a case manager, this will show the rest of the COC that your agency is working with this client. So you simply, under the case manager tab, add case manager. You only need to do it for the head of household because it is assumed that if you're case managing the head of household, you're case managing the entire household. And realistically, we're not going to case manage an 8-year-old. So we're going to select me. And your information will populate here. This is the information provided from our training request form, information that you have provided for us to create your user license. Add case manager. So now we're showing the system that we entered this client. My name's Jessica. I'm currently working with these clients. Case plan. Remember when I said that anything created in a case plan, this is a locked filing cabinet. Only those that have the ability to enter data as this project can see your case notes. So any information that you enter here is kept secured. Only your agency and other users within your agency or within that project can view these case plans. So your case plans vary by provider and what we're looking for, but really we're always looking to see how clients, what they're doing in your case management session. So we can keep it very vague and say that our case management, our classification is case management. Our type is meet with case manager regularly. You can add a goal description, but it's not necessary. We can say maintain stability. And we've identified this need. From here, and this is only if your agency and your project requires you to case manage. Rapid rehousing projects, 100%, you have to have a case plan. Homeless prevention, it just varies. But we will go over that in your project specific training. Case notes, we can add a case note. Case notes should be descriptive in what happened during your case management session with the client. Because you guys work with so many clients, do yourself a favor and add detailed notes to explain what happened in your case management session. You guys are working with various clients on various days from one week to another. You're going to forget what you talked about. I forget what I talked about with my boss like 2 days after I talked about it. So you can identify objectives. But remember, when we're writing our case notes, we want to make sure that we are writing notes. Notes are non-defamatory. Defamatory, if that's even a word. Use motivational interviewing for clients to set their own goals. Coming from a trauma-informed perspective, and detailed description of events taking place in CM session. You can also add action steps. Client will apply for 3 jobs. Apply at Publix. Apply at Costco. So something that you can have that when you go back a week later to check on Brandon and follow up with them, there's something that you can actually see. So you know, oh yeah, I had told Brandon that we were going to do this, that, and the other. And of course, case plans can be very detailed. It really all depends on your funding source and your own internal agency decisions on how we're documenting these interactions. I know George at JFCS, I believe you're working in the VA. I know Edwin's working in the VA. There are very specific requirements that the VA has for housing case plans and when they're created and what we're talking about. We want to keep a very consistent message across the COC, regardless of the provider of the activity. We should all be doing things and documenting things very similarly if they're coming from the same funding source, really. But again, some agencies on this call, you guys may not be providing case management or case plans at all. So this is just kind of an FYI, and when we get into your project specific, we'll go over exactly what you guys will be doing under this tab. From here, I'm going to add an action step. Client apply for 3 jobs. I'm going to give them a target date for the end of the week, saying we identified it, and I want to apply a follow-up date. So I'm going to call Brandon on Monday just to see if he completed this action step. From here, we can add services from this goal, but I'm actually going to just save and exit and add services the old-fashioned way. From our case plan, if we want to add a service for this case management session, we're going to click Service Transactions, Add Service, and select the entire household. Service type is Case Management. Save and continue. I do have step-by-step guides that you guys will all be receiving, so I hope you don't think that you had to retain all of this information as we were going along. You do not. We have an entire 30, there's, I believe, 9 or 10 different step-by-step guides that you guys will all get this. This is creating an ROI. Creating a household. We went through that. Entry exits, doing our HUD verifications. So you guys will all have access to this information after training today. Creating a service. So this is what we're doing right now. We're right here. Okay. So we created a service of case management. There are no funds applied to this. We need to close our service and fully meet the need. We're going to save and exit. So now we're showing the system that we provided this case management session on February 1st. for case management services, we should always, always, always have an accompanying note to identify the case management that happened. So that's why when we're in our case plans, you can either add that service right from that goal, or you can do it separately. But if you have a case management session on February 1st, you should have a case note from February 1st. Okay. So we've added the client into our project through entry exit. We do not manage clients from the client profile. I know this might be something new for the Pasco side of things. Historically, things may have been updated and added through the client profile, but that is not the appropriate way to use HMIS. We need to be using HMIS off of an entry exit program. So I think that's going to be the biggest shift for a lot of you. Go ahead, Tabitha. Thank you.
I hold house meetings once a week. And if I just heard you correctly, every time that I go in and I would have to update the file with their newest updates in HMIS per week? Or
if there is anything that has changed, if information has not changed on the client's record, then no, you would not need to update anything.
okay, so basically I would just add whatever updates they are, like if they're waiting on their voucher or they submitted an application, you want us to now put that information. Well, I guess I didn't know, so I guess I now have to start adding that information in.
That goes back to your case plan, and internally what your agency has decided needs to be updated. Suncoast Partnership is not, we are only responsible for managing the HUD required aspects of things and what our COC has agreed to. Internally, if your agency has stated that this is something that they want to begin doing, then yes. But if internally it is just stated that we need to enter this client into a project and provide them case management, it really is an internal decision. Suncoast Partnership cannot mandate what your case plans look like, because you don't receive funding through any of our programs. So we can't tell you guys how to operate your programs. Okay. I don't know if that, it's something that when you guys are developing your programs that you'll discuss with
Amy, but about it later. I mean, I'll write myself a note to check with her about that later to see how she wants to do it. 'Cause I know she was the one, I think, that was doing my page, so I will get with her and see.
Yeah, we just create the information, especially for Pasco. We are only creating these projects and these and training you guys on how to use it. Operationally, what is required in case plans and updates, it's outside of our ability to govern and assign those duties, because we're not your COC lead and it hasn't been decided at that level. If your COC lead decides, yes, this is something we need to be documenting, then we can train you how to do that, but we can't tell you how to do or tell you what you have to do, if that makes sense.
Yes, ma'am, it does. Okay. Thank you.
Of course, thank you for your question.
I won't interrupt them, I promise.
No, you're fine. I appreciate the questions. I love questions. The only dumb questions are the questions that aren't asked, right, guys? Okay. So our entry exit universe, this is where we're showing that the client's in this project. This is where we're updating information. So we're actually going to hypothetically go, I'm going to go back home. I'll show you guys. See, remember we had that action step. This is how I'm Jessica, and I'm reminding myself that I have this action step to do. So I'm going to show everybody how to do an interim. We're going to say that this is 208. We're going to go to this action step. Oh yeah, we asked the client to apply for 3 jobs. Did the client do this? We'll say yes, and that he achieved this goal. he did it on the 5th. We made our follow-up on the 8th, and that the client achieved it. We're going to save this action step. We're going to add a new client note and say that the client obtained full-time employment at Costco, $15 an hour. You would, of course, have more information, just that, but in the interest of time, I'm going to save this case note and show you guys how to reflect that increase of income. The client is no longer on unemployment. They have increased their income. So we need to show the system that. We do that in an interim. And this, again, this is in your step-by-step guide. So you will have this to reference at a later date. We're going to add an interim, just an update, and reflect the client's increase of income. We're going to scroll. Any questions that appear here? In RCOC, we are asking COVID, and FL500, we are asking if COVID-19 has affected your ability to gain or maintain housing stability. This is something that we will be able to gauge how COVID-19 has affected clients that are in homeless prevention or rapid rehousing project. So please, if this is on your assessment, ask and answer. We're going to go to our income portion. We're not just going to change the income amount. So we're going to do $15 times 40 times 4. Oof, good job, Brandon. He's making $2,400 a month, give or take after taxes. So we're going to say 2,400. Yes. Are we done? Absolutely not. We need to make sure that we end those old incomes because he is no longer receiving this unemployment. So we need to click on our pencil. And the old income for the day before, we're adding new information. So we are hypothetically on February 8th. So we need to end the income for the day before, February 7th. We're going to end this. We don't just change the receiving income from any source to a no, because that would be like if we went back to an old intake form and scratched out the yes and changed it to no. No, we want to maintain the integrity of the data and not copy over it. We need to create a new record set. So we end this old income, saying that the client was receiving this, saying that no, he is not. Say that no, and then we need to change our earned income. This says that the client's not receiving earned income. Again, we're not just going to change it to yes. We need to end the no and add a yes, 2,400. We're going to save and exit. And then remember, we have, actually, I had forgotten, we have that client's child support, 360. So now that puts him, see, 33,120. Go back to AMI. 33,120. He's over 50%. Good job, Brandon. Good job, case managers. You got Brandon increasing his income. And so now we've shown the system that Brandon increased his income, which is a nationwide system performance measure. HUD wants to see that at least 30% of the clients entered into your project are increasing their income. This is nationwide. So every COC is, your system performance measures have these outcomes, and this is how we show it. Let me go back to our dashboard. At one point, So we see that percentage from rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing who have increased their income. All of this data is gathered by creating those interims. So you want to make sure all of HMIS and CSIS is showing your work. You want to show the client, tell the client's story and show your work. What did you do with the client? When did you meet them? What services did you provide? Has the client increased their income? Have they become stably housed? We can answer all of those questions based on the data that you guys enter. Okay. So from there, we can add a financial service. We're going to add, say we identified housing for the client. We're going to add a rental deposit and save and continue. From here, we're going to apply funds. And this, of course, is specific to your project. If you guys, if you have federal dollars in here, you have to account for the client for the funding source. Your funding source has to be added to HMIS if they're federal dollars. So we can search for our vendor as landlord. We're going to add that, keep it generic, add a funding source. We'll just do this. And the deposit is $700. Can we edit the client profile info, but click on an exited case pencil? Shannon, I will have to go into the client. I think I know your question, but allow me to finish this portion. So we're applying $700 from our funding source. Again, we're just going to close the need, fully met, save and exit. So now we're showing the system that the client has received this funding source and they're moving into housing. So in order to edit client information, if the client is enrolled in your project, you should be editing it from the entry. Whatever, if you have information. So here's why we don't edit information in a client profile. I will show you. So let's say it goes back to point in time. Let's say I am changing the client's demographic to his birthday is now May. Whoops, got it wrong. I edited in client profile. We are in client profile. I am editing from client profile. I save this. This information does not carry backward. So if we go into the client's entry and I click on the entry, it will show the client's birth date, for instance, is January 8th, because that information will carry forward, but it doesn't carry back in time. It's that point in time. So if we're editing client information that is in our client that is in our project, we need to be editing it from the entry of that program. If the client's not in a program, then it's kind of moot. It doesn't matter. It's like a cow's opinion. Little Friends joke. Sorry. So you always want to be editing client information in an entry, because that's when we created the client. The only time we really should be editing client profile information in a client profile is if it is information, if the client's not in one of your projects and you just want to make sure that the system has the most up-to-date information to carry forward. It does not go backward. Data doesn't go back in time. It just carries forward. It's that point in time thing. So if we wanted to exit the client, so let's exit the client. We're going to exit the entire household. Always be very mindful of exiting the entire household. A lot of times people go through the motions and do not select the household. We're going to say reason for leaving is completed program. the destination. We got the client housed. So this is their rental by client, client housed. Save and continue. For any rapid rehousing providers that are on the call, there's a lot more to this process that we will go over in your program specific, but I just want to, in the interest of time. See, and then here again, Shannon, we don't have that opportunity to edit that client's demographic information on our exit. So you always want to edit that client information in the entry of your program. If the client doesn't have an entry into your program, then yes, you could edit from the client profile. Okay, cool, thanks. Okay, so nothing else has changed. We're going to add the client's new address because they are housed 208.1. We're going to save and add another and add 1, 2, 3, 4. Happy place. We'll just go down here. Apply our zip code information. Yes. All of this populates. Same email, btest@gmail. Cell phone, still the same. And we save. So now we've shown the system. The client is no longer in emergency shelter. I'm actually going to fix that. So the client exited the emergency shelter and went to this housing. We can save and exit. And now we have successfully exited the client from our project. Every project's different in how long the client's in the program. Every project has varying levels of information that's collected. We will go over that. A lot of you have program specific training already set up with me, either later this week or into next week, where me and Amy, or just myself, will go in depth into the expectations of your project and your program. I try to keep our basic skills very general and a very basic overview. So you're not learning a lot of information that's not necessary to what you'll be doing. But that's, again, why we have our program specific. So really, I hope that you all leave class today not feeling super confused. But if you are, I totally understand. There was a lot of us on the call doing a lot of different projects, but mainly we want to make sure that we are entering entire households in this entry-exit universe into the correct projects and making sure that we're entering data as the appropriate projects and we're providing the appropriate services under those correct projects. Before you leave, I just want to make sure to go over this because I didn't earlier. When we add a service, just like when we added an entry for the client, if our service provider is ever wrong, we cannot just like the entry exit, you can't just say, oh, whoops, I'm in the wrong provider and change it like that. You have to make sure that you are entering data as the correct project. Anytime you create an entry or anytime you create a service, always make sure that you are in the right project that you're entering data as, because it goes back to them not talking to each other. Far too often, we are entering data as the wrong project and then creating services or entries, and they don't talk to each other, and it creates a lot of work for yourself on the back end. So unless anybody has any questions, I'm going to send, I know this was a lot of information, but we do have a basic skills quiz that we're going to go over just real quick before we leave today. Let me share it real quick with you guys. Does anybody have any questions right now, right off the bat, before I share this quiz? Okay. Make a Copy. Okay. So I'm adding it to our chat. If everybody can click this link, we're going to take this quiz real quick, and after everybody's done, we'll be able to leave class today. I know this was a lot of information. This is not a punitive quiz. This is just for us to gauge the information that was delivered.
I've lost everybody here.
I can hear you, Tabitha.
Okay, I guess my brain's screen is just frozen then. The question that I had that I was trying to type, because evidently sometimes it lets me, sometimes it doesn't, is that is there a way for me to double up my training or take extra training?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you need any extra training, you can set something up with us.
Tabitha's going to need veteran training with the VI SPDAT. Her program is for veterans, it's like Ellen's. So, okay.
Sorry, who's talking? I can't.
That
tell.
was Amy. I'm gonna so just send us myself and Amy an email and asking for what training and which users you would like to attend the training so we can get that scheduled for you guys.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I figured it
Also,
out.
for those,
Maybe
Sorry.
could we just wait, if I want to go through, have everybody, we've got 23 people on the call. So in the interest of time, I just want to keep everybody very general right now before we talk any program specific things. Getting a lot of great responses. Thank you, everybody. Once we have, we'll say anywhere 15 to 20, because there are 23 people on the call. So once we get around 15 to 20 responses, we'll go over the quiz together. Great. Keep them coming, guys. Thank you so much for taking our quiz. We are halfway there. Great. Keep them coming, guys. Thank you. All right, so we have Yanira, Shannon, Sarah, Brian, Janine and Nicole, Kathleen, Rebecca, Lidney, Natasha, Renee, Marianne, both Brians, Edwin, Ashley, Carla. All right, we're at about 15, 17. Thank you, guys. All right, 19. Oh my gosh, almost everybody took it. Thank you guys so much. All right. Let's go through this. Make sure, let's check the chat. How do we know what? So there is no score. I'll go over everybody's responses. As you can see, it's all tabulated. Oh, wow. Thank you guys. Everybody's taking the test. That makes me so happy. And we will go over the score and be able to, you'll know what you responded. It is anonymous. So you'll know what you responded and what we can work on more in the future just to get further clarification. Thank you, Tabitha. Okay, so this is I'm like so happy. If the client is already in CSIS with information, I do not need to review or change any of it. Everybody said false. Thank you. 100% confetti and Smarties for all. Thank you guys so much. As we know and as we went over, we have to review every bit of that data. We cannot ensure that that data is complete, that it's current, or that it's correct, or that it's consistent. So A+, everybody on the call, thank you. What is required for you to be able to share client information? So I'm assuming that this is split because, of course, our Pasco County friends, we still have agency releases of information. So yes, agency releases of information for our FL 519 friends, and then our universal release of information for our FL 500 friends. I might have to go in and change that question because I could see where it would be a little confusing. So of course, universal release of information for Sarasota Manatee, and then unless Pasco has that universal, or maybe we're developing it, we want to make sure that we're having that agency release of information signed. But nobody said nothing, so A+ in my book. So which residence prior is an example of a client who is literally homeless? Choose all that apply. So again, if you guys are the only response, we have 19 and 21. So really, when we're talking about it, it can be an emergency shelter or a place not meant for habitation or an emergency shelter paid for by an emergency shelter voucher. So that would be if your agency had hotel motel funds, that would be acceptable. But when we're looking at hotel paid for by client, nobody selected that up top. Staying or living with a family member's room, apartment, or house, that would only be acceptable if the client was literally homeless less than 7 days prior to staying there. So typically, we don't accept that staying in a family member's room, apartment, or house as a literally homeless situation. But I do know that I gave that example during our training, so maybe that's where the confusion came into play. Either way, good job, everybody. I do not have to answer additional information fields. This is false. So let's just keep in mind that if we have additional information fields on our assessment, we are asking every question that's on our assessment. If there are questions on your assessment that either program directors or supervisors are saying, oh, don't worry about answering that question, please direct them to let us know so we can remove those questions, because it's not in the best interest of the COC to have a bunch of questions on your assessment if you're not going to answer them. So please ask and answer every question on your assessment, regardless of the color of the font or whether it's additional information or HUD verification. If it's on your intake form, please ask and answer. The client's information can be left out blank or with old information. This, thank you. 20. I wish I could give everybody like some kind of candy bar or something. Virtual candy bars for everybody. Thank you. Is it okay to discuss information about client with my family or friends? Absolutely not. Our clients are trusting us with their information. So please maintain that anonymity, maintain that trust with your clients, and keep their personal information to yourself. I do not have to review all responses to disability and income. Again, this is I'm going to tell you guys, this is one of the best quizzes I've seen. Thank you guys so much. With all that information and all of us on this call, give yourselves a major round of applause for these responses. So this happens. And I kind of assumed that because we only briefly went over this. If information is old on a sub-assessment, what date do I end that old information for? All old information should be entered for the day before. We always want to end our sub-assessments, so those are those pop-up questions, for the day before we're adding new information. We only briefly went over that, but Just keep in mind that when we end that old information for the day before, it's so that the system is showing that on the day before, I'm adding this new information, that old information ended. Because if we end it for the same day, like for instance, disability, say we ended an old disability, that the client does not have that disability. For the same day that we're adding disability, it's showing that the system that the client did and did not have a disability on that date. And that just doesn't make sense, right? That's the same thing with income. If we ended an old income on the same day we're adding new income, we're saying that the client did and did not have that income on the same date. So just keep in mind, anytime we end old information, it is the day before. And who can I share my user ID and password with? 0, 100% for everybody. Thank you guys so much. This is honestly one of the best quizzes I've seen, responses. Thank you guys so much for all of your time and your participation. I will be seeing a majority of you again in our future trainings so we can go, good job, George. Was it the day before question that you got wrong, maybe?
It was the agency, which universal or agency question.
Well, hey, that's all right. Now we know universal release of information for RCOC. Brian got a 100%. Awesome. I love it. I love the gift. Thank you, guys. I'm going to send out your user IDs and passwords and all the training information that we went over today. Give me by the close of business day. I'm going to do my best to do it during this lunch break. Okay, what's up, Amy?
I just want to mention that I did send out to the agencies that I was aware of an invitation to next Tuesday. There is a heart-specific training for Pasco. So if if I was known and approved, I still don't have a final list from the county yet. But the ones that I was aware of, that information was sent out an invite. So talk to your supervisor about getting that if you will be entering information into the heart. For the point in time, there was an invitation sent out for the point in time in Pasco for outreach workers who will be doing that with, I believe it was Sword and Spoon, as well as the Metropolitan Ministries, if there's anyone on this call from them. So that is Monday afternoon. Again, that is a program specific to the pit. And that's all.
Thank you, Amy. Everybody else, you guys are free to go unless you have any questions. I'll hang out on the line for any questions that you may have, but you will get your user ID and password information. Thank you, Allie. If you don't already have it, you will get it by close of business day. I don't know about you guys, but I am hungry. Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, Janine. Thank you, Sarah. Congratulations, Janine, on the oh, they already left. Funding award.
Amy, or she left, didn't she?
She did leave, yes.
Okay, I'll email her. Thank you so very much, Lauren. You have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Tabitha. You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have to figure out how to get off this thing. I said, go figure. I would figure out how to turn the camera on like 5 minutes before it's over.
Hey, now you know next time, though, because this won't be the last training that we have.
I do. Thank you so very much.
Of course. All right, I'm gonna go ahead.
Hang up for me. Hang up for me.
I'm gonna end. Don't worry.
Thank you. Jesus. Mm.